Okay, welcome again, everyone, and thank you for coming to the virtual 2020 RAISE Summit. We are so excited to have you all here. This is by far the largest conference we have had, and we are more than excited that we will be able to provide captioning and Spanish interpretation today. If you are not aware of RAISE, we were first funded in 2014 to support the regional centers funded by the RSA to provide technical assistance on transition across the country. The RAISE team consists of myself and my co-director, Peg Kinzel, then the executive co-director of SPAN, Deborah Jennings, our resource and product coordinator, and really my right-hand woman, Miriam Elizo, and our administrative assistant, Maria Rodriguez. For a lot of you, this is maybe a new type of virtual meeting, and so I wanted to go through some of the basics of Zoom as we get started. First off, you will see probably along the bottom of your screen a bar that looks like the one towards the bottom, and the different options are unmute, start video, security participants, chat. You probably have more options or a button that says more on the right. Because of the size of this event, we ask all of you to stay muted and to not share your video until we are in our breakout groups. But the important part is the little tiny arrows right beside the unmute or right beside the video, and I'll show you why in a moment. Using the chat box, this chat box, you will see the button that says chat. It might be under the more button, and this will allow you to chat with either the entire group or someone that you select. So as you can see right down towards the bottom, it says to everyone. If you are needing captioning or you're struggling with some issue with Zoom, please send the message to me, Josie Badger, and I will support you. So click off of everyone and find Josie Badger. I will support you. The important reason for the captioning, for those of you using it, message me, is to make sure that you are in the right group when we do breakout groups and that the captioner is in that room. If you are using language interpretation, there is a button that you can see that looks like a little world, either on the toolbar or under more. Click on that button and then click the language that you would like to hear. So it's either English or Spanish. And then we recommend that you click mute original audio. Otherwise, you will hear a faint background of the English and or Spanish. So I recommend muting the original audio. Miriam, would you be able to translate that?
Of course. Sí, buenas tardes. Para las personas que les hace falta interpretación al español, tenemos a Patricia aquí en el canal de español. En la banda inferior de la computadora, la banda inferior negra, hay un círculo con la forma del mundo, como un globo, con la palabra interpretation. Hace falta que vayan allá, hagan clic a ese sitio y está la opción de español, para escuchar en español. Se hace clic a español, Spanish, y luego para filtrar la información en inglés viene como atenuado, muy bajito, para eliminar el sonido en inglés, que es el original, se hace clic en mute original audio, tal como sale aquí en la pantalla, mute original audio. Eso es todo. Cualquier pregunta que tengan me pueden escribir por el chat si tienen alguna duda. Está Patricia en la orden para hacer en español, las 3 horas. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And once again, if you have any problems, please message either Miriam or myself. Next, this is just a description of how to use the closed captioning. You would click the CC button or the More button to find the closed captioning. You would then select that. And then if you need to change the size of the font, you would click the little arrow that is beside the video camera and click Video Settings. That should put you into the closed captioning font size, and it will be a slider bar to make it larger. The agenda today is that we will be starting with Organization Resilience by Tip Fallon, then Policy Updates by Ron Hager, and finally the Spotlights by the RSA PTIs. Once again, we are so glad that you all are joining us. This is, I think, a learning curve for all of us, and I'm excited to try these new experiences and share all of this with you. So thank you again for joining us. At this point, I'm going to be turning it over to Tip.
Excellent. Is my audio coming in okay? Yes, excellent. Good morning, good afternoon. Hola, buenos dias to Spanish-speaking friends. Yeah, my name is Tip Fallon. Very glad to be here with you all today.
Tip, are you with us?
Yes. You hear me? Hello?
For some reason, we cannot hear you, Tip.
I can hear you.
That's interesting.
I hear you, Tip.
I hear him too.
I'm hearing, yeah, a lot of people are saying they are hearing me. Josie and Miriam? Josie, testing.
It seems
That's
like
odd.
they're not hearing. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, a lot of
cannot hear him.
testing.
Okay,
I wonder if
Tip,
it's
are
the
you
room.
potentially in the Spanish room?
Let me go to chat here.
Go
Hi.
down to
I
the
don't think
interpretation.
I'm in the
Go to
Spanish
English.
room.
Click on English.
I think that they can hear him, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now
I
I'm
hear you in
in
English.
English room. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Josie?
I do.
I had it as off, so now it's in English. Okay, all right. So that was, we planned that just as an example that we are all learning through this process.
That's right.
I'm going to share my screen in a second. So you should see a slide with organizational resilience
Yes.
up on here. So yeah, as Josie was saying, probably the easiest way to engage is using the chat box. Just to let you know, when I have my slides up, I don't see all the chats, so Miriam will be helping to read the chats. And Miriam, if you want to like unmute and share verbally, if you want to just say, hey, we have a few questions coming up, that will be great. Okay. Just to build a little bit on Zoom, I hope everyone's able to use the chat box. There's also, I believe in the chat box, a raise hand feature to be called on, but today chat might be the easiest way to share. We covered muting and unmuting. In the chat box, correct me if I'm wrong here, but there may be buttons to ask me to slow down or speed up. I'm seeing a head nod. Those do not actually control me. So when you're pressing them, it may take a minute for Miriam to let me know, hey, a few people are asking slow down or speed up. Towards your bottom buttons, I think there should be a reactions button, and you can use that to indicate an applause or do a thumbs up just if you want to engage and let people know what they're sharing is relevant. The last piece here is we'll go for a bit over an hour. I'm going to try to end and give you all a break before the next session. So that said, please self-manage any breaks that you need to take. Okay, so I'll share a little bit about me besides being the presenter and a consultant. So just by background, I am half Thai. My mother's from Thailand. My dad is American born, primarily of Irish ancestry. I grew up in Maryland in Prince George's County, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. My family on my mom's side is actually from the Northeast region in Thailand. So culturally, we have and share a lot of Lao culture. Most of our community here is with the Lao community, and actually with the Lao refugee community from the American, the Vietnam, and the war in Southeast Asia. And I only bring that up because one of the questions in the Survey Monkey was, how is this relevant to most vulnerable populations? So I wanted to share just a little bit from my personal experience about the ideas and practices of resilience that I've learned from my sort of Lao aunties and uncles, if you will, from the refugee community. My wife and I are currently living in California. She is finishing graduate school, and then we'll move to the Midwest after this. I teach at American University, and also I finished my studies there in organization development. My personal business is called Fallon Consulting. I know, a very creative name. My last name is Fallon. And I've had this practice for about 5 years, worked with a lot of community-based organizations, all the way up to multinational-based organizations around change, strategic planning, how to navigate just difficult changes as an organization. And we have a dog. His name is London. He is a rescue, part shepherd, part husky, very handsome, and gets away with a lot of things. All right, so that's a little bit about me. So today, again, the topic that I'll be engaging with you all in is organizational resilience. And while we'll talk about it in an organizational context, so much of it is about how do we use ourselves. I often share with clients that the idea of locus of control, right? There's so little we can fully control outside of ourselves. We can influence a lot, and we'll talk about that. But when we think about control and where to start, I often invite us to really start with ourselves at the individual level. So that said, let's spend the next about 4 or 5 minutes and actually just going to start with yourself. I'm going to ask you to check in with yourself. I'm going to guide us through just some breathing. You can have your eyes closed or open, be in any posture for this. You don't need to be sitting, standing, or anything. So find a comfortable position with yourself, and we're going to start with ourself as we begin this discussion on resilience. So I'll invite you, if you're comfortable, you can rest your eyes, and if not, if you're reading, for example, totally understand. But wherever you are, I'm going to invite you to just simply take a nice full inhale. And then a soft exhale. And just for a moment, try to forget about the rest of this session, the rest of the slides, the 19 things on your to-do list, the chimes of people joining in. I invite you just to bring your awareness to your own breathing and to your body. I want you to think of something that's important to you. That might be a value, it might be a principle. And as you inhale, I invite you just to imagine inhaling the energy of whatever that value or intention is that's important to you. And as you do your exhales, invite your body just to soften a little bit. And reminding yourself that as you inhale, you can breathe in and channel that intention or whatever's important to you, just to remind your body of that. And as you take the next several breaths, just focus on some gratitude for your own body. It can be for you, it can be for others in your circle and your family who are holding space for you to be here. It can be for our coordinators who have done a great job with all the logistics today. So just be in your body and just hold some energy of gratitude. Okay, so as you're ready, you may reopen your eyes if you had them closed. And let's go, if you can pull up your chat box into the chat window. There's my screen here. And just type in, how are you feeling right now as we start today? What came up for you in your body and in your emotions? And it can be one word, you know, probably keep it to a sentence at the most so that we can try to read through them. Okay, I'm seeing some there. Lisa says sleepy, hopeful, more relaxed, agitated, grateful, at peace, interested, quieter mind, calm, sad, thank you, present, thank you. Okay. All right, are we on? Get my slides back up here. Okay. All right, so overview as we shift more into the next phase. So overview of our next about hour today. I'm going to change this slightly. It says review attributes of resilience. Really, I'm going to just share a few stories and I'd like to hear through the chat just some of your reactions. You'll have time for a couple of breakout group discussions. We may shift this in the moment in terms of their duration or how many we do, but the current plan is to have you go into breakout groups for a couple of rounds. So the total time for that is about 20 minutes, so each round might be around 7 minutes or 10 minutes. Then we'll have time as a full group to just share what themes and questions came up for you from the small groups. And then finally, at the end, I'll ask you to reflect on, are there any takeaways and any next steps that you'd like to share into the chat. And these slides will be made available to you. So I hope that relieves any pressure that you feel to take any notes. Let's see here. So first question I have, I'm going to ask you to type into the chat again. Can you type in for the read ahead materials that went out? I think there were actually 2 documents related to this. And if you can just type in one word and they were optional, but this will help me decide what to focus on. So So if you can just type in one word of none for if you haven't read any of it yet, skim if you've skimmed any of it, or read, R-E-A-D, if you've read the documents. And this is again, they were optional, so this is a no judgment zone. If you can take a second to do that. Pam says, oops, no worries. Pam, it was optional. Okay, so I'm seeing a good mix across between none all the way to red. So it seems like a good mix. Thank you. Slide back up. Okay. So I do this. So I'll start by actually going through some of these elements and attributes for resilient organizations. And I won't go into detailed descriptions because you have the written text of these in full. I also want to make clear that when we talk about organizational resilience, there is not a formula or a right way or answer to approach this. The intention today is to provide a few different lenses or a few different questions that you can use to ask when you're facing a difficult situation or a difficult decision or change in your organization. And so these are really tools to put in your toolbox to just strengthen your approach to make your organization more resilient. Let's see, and actually before, okay. And before I go into the different elements, and well, let me say in terms of the documents that you have, the latest document that was sent out, the handout, there's a one-page version. So if you have time to pull that up for yourself, that would be the most relevant and the simplest document to have to look through for today. But otherwise, I will talk through the elements. So before going into the elements, I just want to share that even the word resilience can mean different things to different people. And I'll share some stories around that. But in short, I'll talk about a couple case studies, but a decision, for example, for an organization to adapt its program or adapt its service offerings in order to survive and maybe have more, serve more constituents or get more funding might be seen as resilient from one person's perspective, whereas to another person's perspective, resilience may mean not changing and actually holding very true to a more original or the current state. They may see change as compromising to the intention and to the spirit and purpose of the organization. And so if that organization changes programming to survive, even though by some definition we may say it's resilient because it's adapting to survive, from another definition some may say that's actually not resilient because you are no longer the organization that you were founded to be. So I share that because, as I said, there's no exactly right answer, but my hope from this is that you get some questions and some perspectives to engage in conversations with yourselves today and moving forward on how do you have these conversations, what are the right conversations that you should be having with your team to figure these things out. Let me go to, try to pull up my chat, and maybe let's do the reactions button. So if you can go down to the reactions, and if I could see maybe a thumbs up or a hand clap if that resonates with you. because that is a key underlying assumption to what I'll present today. But in short, that resilience is subjective to the interpreter, and that today it's about, here's some questions you can use. Okay, so I'm seeing some thumbs up, and yeah, so Miriam, I'll lean on you to, if you can unmute if you see questions as we go, to share them with us. All right. So next I'll briefly go through the 9 elements, and then I'll just tell a few case studies, a few stories about this. And I did see a question, I saw a few questions come in on the SurveyMonkey, and one that came up, as I alluded to earlier, was how does this translate to more vulnerable populations? So I want to address that when we talk about the case studies. So the first 3 attributes that you see on your screen, vision and purpose, priorities and focus, and then learning and developmental mindset. So the first 2 are kind of related, vision and purpose, priorities and focus. And where I see organizations and teams get into trouble is that we each have our own worldview of what the right thing is to do for the organization, what the right focus is, purposes, the priorities are. And sometimes we assume that others have the same priorities and focus, or when they don't. And sometimes we might assume that others don't have the same priority and focus, and we might get into too much conflict or contention because I may think that you're against my priority or against what I see as the vision and purpose. But if we don't actually talk about it, we may not even see where we have common ground, where we have the same goals. So that's just a major piece here. When I use mindfulness in the work too, a part of what's so hard about this is in our minds, we get into that fight or flight response when we feel, threatened or when we feel scarcity. We can get very reactive. And so it's hard to actually slow us down, take a pause and say, hey, Josie, or hey, Miriam, I think I'm making an assumption about what you think is most important for the organization. Can I clarify that? As opposed to just getting into debates about what we should be doing. Shifting to the third attribute here, the learning and developmental mindset. And this is related to that fight or flight response as well, is it actually takes some courage to be a little bit more vulnerable. So the organizations and teams who I see do this well, they are able to share when things are not going well, or when, they feel like something under their purview is not going well, and get feedback and have honest conversations and say, hey, this program, it looks like the quality of our program is suffering, or it looks like we're actually excluding one of the key demographics that we were set up to serve. Or it looks like we're capitulating a little too much to our donors. And those are difficult topics to bring up and to name because in a sense, they may show that we haven't been doing the best that we can. So orgs that do this well take that learning and developmental mindset of just knowing that this is all learning. Even in this webinar, right, we're kind of learning the different tools and Zoom as we go. And it's giving ourselves some grace to say, okay, we don't have everything figured out. So how can we learn here? Even looking down to the staff level, one way to use a learning and developmental mindset is when we need to change as an organization, what's the opportunity for staff to grow in their sort of professional or personal skill set, from training, from more education to help the organization grow as well. I'll pause here. Miriam, are you seeing any questions?
No questions, a couple of claps, and yes. Oh,
excellent.
Very good.
Okay. Yeah, I encourage you to use the reactions, the clap, the thumbs up. So I don't see them on my screen, but Miriam can see them. My time here. Checking my time briefly. Okay. A few other attributes, courageous conversations. I won't elaborate on that too much, except to say that that's what the situation calls for. There's a quote that says, nothing changes until the unspoken is spoken. So again, nothing changes until the unspoken is spoken. So I'll let that marinate with you. The middle one, engaging others. Yeah, all I'll say there, right, is there's a big difference between usually what it looks like is folks at the tops of organizations or who are most central in the middle of an organization coming around a table and trying to figure everything out, versus really engaging those who are most impacted by their work, by their services. It can be, the core beneficiaries and constituents. It can be partner organizations. It can be community leaders, national organizations, funders, et cetera. In short, the more we try to engage others, different voices, different perspectives, usually the more resilient an organization can be. The third one here is impact and relevance. I've alluded to this earlier, but that's really sitting with the difficult questions, if you will, of what are we intending to do as an organization? Do we know what our key outcomes are? Do we know how we measure success? And then when we hold up the mirror, like how true are we to meeting those needs and making the impact we want to make? But then also, as the ecosystem changes around us, as our constituents' needs change, and a major change is just technology. If you look at how we're engaging today, but certainly in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, with more things happening on mobile, the internet, of course, but all these virtual facilitative tools, how is our relevance impacted by that, specifically if we do a lot of stuff that is in person, that is face-to-face and traditional? So just a few other attributes. Miriam, are you seeing any questions?
No questions. A couple of comments. Nothing changes until the unspoken is spoken. That was sent privately, but it's there. Yeah.
Excellent. And I apologize, I don't know who that's attributed to, but I'll look it up. But it's not me. So the final three here is risk management. And that's just really having that mindset of scanning and not taking things for granted for the organization. As COVID-19 has shown us, we should not take things always for granted. And there's that balance, right, of not being, just overly risk averse and not being too complacent as well. So for me, usually I try to encourage folks to find that middle path of let's monitor our risks and not be so fixated on all the things that go wrong that we don't actually take action and enjoy the process. So risk management, scenario planning is one of the ideas that came up as I was chatting with Josie before this. Of sometimes you may know the major risks around funding, around engagement, around your constituents, and there might be one or two scenarios that you may want to prep for of what happens if this funding source increases or decreases. What happens if we lose, for whatever reason, some of our core staff? What happens if we know our partnership organization might be closing their doors in a couple years? Like, what are those scenario plans that we need to have prepped for sort of a situation A, situation B, and situation C around those? So I would encourage that when you have a sense of what may be around the corner for the organization. The middle piece is opportunities and assets. So that's taking that scan internal. And here there's, of course, financial, but one of the biggest assets that I work with organizations is institutional knowledge and relationships. So sometimes I have orgs do a relationship map or a stakeholder map. So each person thinks about organizations, but also individuals, whether it's anywhere in the ecosystem, policymakers, funders, donors, again, community leaders. And when you look at your organization from that more appreciative lens of like, wow, look at how much we have, then we can start to think about what could we create with all of this institutional knowledge, all of this passion, all of these relationships. How can we bring these pieces together to create something to make that positive impact that we want to make in the world? The final attribute is the emotional lens. Let's say around this, here are a few questions that I have for leaders is, do you know what people are feeling in your organization right now? And also external to your organization. And then simply, how do you tend to that? What do you need to tend to? And then finally, where sort of follow the energy is often my guidance, whether that's an energy of something that needs to be mourned or processed, or there's some energy where people are excited and really want to act. How do you follow that energy and sort of meet people where they are emotionally? Where organizations can become more brittle is when they ignore that energy, and leaders may just want to push ahead tactically. If people are really, reeling or hurting from a loss, it can come off very tone deaf, right? So just really paying attention to that lens. Let's see. So I'll tell, a quick story and talk a little bit about the question from the Survey Monkey around vulnerable populations, which I thank you for the question, by the way, it's very helpful. So one brief story is a client organization that I worked with. They provide a lot of educational services. They've been around for 30 years. This is in the higher educational space. And I'd say about 10 years ago, their enrollment started to decline. So this is a master's level education program. And their program ran for about 28 months, 28-month program for a master's degree. Meanwhile, their peer organizations ran programs that were about 16 to 18 months for the same master's degree. And so there was a lot of, internal battle between, should we sort of meet that market demand and compromise what we see as quality in our program and what's really core to what we believe develops highly skilled practitioners in this program, or do we shift to what it looks like the market is demanding right now and go to 18 months programs? So the decision was made that they went to the 18-month program. This caused a lot of turmoil because, again, for I guess it was 25 years or so at that point, it had run for 27, 28-month programs. And the whole idea was to have enough time for people to really develop a deep and strong skill set that they felt they just could not do in an 18-month period. So enrollment did go up for a little bit, but it was kind of mixed. But recently, it's actually gone down quite a bit. And one of the reasons there is, part of it is actually the quality. So they, in a sense, sort of over-compromised and said, oh, let's do what's going to bring in the dollars, what people are buying in this market right now. But they actually gave up, that sort of essence or that initial purpose and cause for the program. So again, from this lens of resilience, right, we can argue it both ways. Was it a good decision or not a good decision? If they hadn't gone to 18 months, maybe they would have ended up closing the doors earlier, who knows? And then another layer of this that program had a challenge with is, everything was in person. They also had an international component of bringing their students abroad, doing international work. And the program, I would say, struggled for many years as more programs, their peer organizations, were going to more remote-based learning. Again, using more Zoom-based stuff to really, reduce the cost of delivering the program, but also meet people where they don't have to travel across the country to get in person. And the program just really never adopted that. They said, no, the in-person face-to-face is so valuable to us that we will not compromise that, even if it brings in more students. And as COVID-19 happened, they just could not shift gears fast enough to get that offering. And with the combination of enrollment, already going down and the costs in higher education increasing, when we talk about risk management, right, the costs going up, they've actually decided to close their doors after their final enrolled cohort finishes. So I just share that story to, to sort of, there's my arrows here to pull up, right? So, and asking you, if you were their consultant, if you will, like, how did vision and purpose come up? Like, was it discussed enough? Was it not discussed enough? It seems like there was a big difference in priorities and focus. So as you think about your organization, are you having those hard conversations? Was there a learning and development mindset? From my angle, I saw them as being a little bit resistant to learning something new and developing something new. They said, no, our way is the right way. It is the best way, right? In that. had its consequence. I think they did have courageous conversations. I think they knew the realities that they were looking at. To a degree, I think they got input from others, but there's also a difference between getting symbolic input from others and actually giving people power in the decision-making process. And then impact and relevance. I mean, yeah, when the doors are closed, there's not much more impact or relevance to be made. So they really made some trade-offs in staying true to their roots, but in the long run, they couldn't adapt fast enough. It became just too brittle as an organization, even though they had something really, really good. Okay, so I'll kind of pause there on that story, but that's just a small case study to share how all these things are at play. So I wanted to address the question about how does this apply to vulnerable populations? And I saw that question this morning, so these are still emerging thoughts. But a few things that resonate for me is starting with the self. And so trying to develop and hold that positive self-image. And I think mostly from the refugee community that helped raise me, that I grew up with, they can be so difficult to exist in a world where the stereotypes and the images of you are that you do not fit in here, you do not belong, you are insufficient, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I drew it from some of my uncles in particular was just really trying to ignore that noise and taking agency over one's own self-image and say, you know what, the odds may be stacked against me, but I'm going to set my mind to do X, whether it's get that degree or do well at this job or whatever it is. So finding agency in your own self-image, I thought was very important to resilience. Another piece that comes up for me, the second one is actually honoring loss. This goes along with the emotional lens. But one thing I see in the communities I grew up with was some people honored some losses and some didn't. And there's that consequence to that. So, coming from a, refugee status, from like a war situation that drove your move, I observed a lot of trauma. I know folks who had, mental, like TBIs issues, but also a lot of emotional trauma in that. And my experience was some people process that loss a little bit more, and some people, didn't. And there's a lot of stigma, specifically in the community I grew up in, around getting things like therapy and self-care and things like that. So that's, I guess, the other piece that I would think about is what does honoring that loss look like? How do we process the trauma there? And kind of end at the second point there, which does lead to the third point, is just around the power of the collective. So one thing I see very powerful there is just creating those networks and that collective and that community of people that can hold us, right? Hold space for us, nurture us. They might not be able to provide a lot of institutional supports, like whether it's financial or otherwise, but just being in a collective where we feel less alone, we feel nurtured and supported, to have this safe space to call our home. From my experiences, something I observed is very powerful for the most vulnerable populations. So let me pause there, because afterwards we're going to start to give you some time to discuss in breakout groups. So Miriam, any questions that came up?
Yeah, we have some comments actually. Yeah, Deborah says this is very relevant as we figure out our next normals as our state announces reopening, especially the emotional lens. And Rihanna says this is great, and we practice this in our organization, knowing the strength of employee help to honor and value the staff. Also, emotional check-ins are very important. And Sandra says employees are worried about going back into the office as many have small children at home. How do we plan going back to the office while taking both the employees' needs and the organizational needs, trying to keep stress levels down? And Cheryl says, sometimes the best way on an immediate basis isn't necessarily the best way with the long term in mind.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you all for those comments. Those certainly resonate. That's a key sort of scenario planning to do, right? Is what if reopening happens at, this month, X month, or the other month, to just have some of those mitigation plans in place. Yeah, just the working from home with those who have children. When we go back to that principle of engaging others, one thing I recommend leaders do at this time is, whether it's a survey, one-on-one phone calls, whatever, is don't assume you know what is happening in your staff or employees or volunteers worlds, right? Like, ask those questions. Like, some of the questions I would ask are like, what's your ideal bandwidth in terms of number of hours? What's your ideal work location? How many would you like to come in at all? If so, how many days, how many hours? And what are your on and off hours? Different orgs, some orgs like to be on almost 24/7, would prefer that to a more structured, and some orgs say, no, like, I really want us to be really off on our weekends and our evenings. So again, just not making those assumptions, but really engaging others as you figure that out. The other saying in my work is what people, oh man, some of you all may know it, but what we create, we support, right? In short, so let people co-create this with you. And if your staff here, see if there's a voice or a process for you to help your leaders co-create this piece of work. One thing I'll share is that I am not convinced that any leader has it all figured out yet. And often leaders can be reluctant to say that, look, I don't have the answers here. It can, and there's reasons for that too. As a leader myself, sometimes I don't want to put that labor onto employees to sort of do my job or help me figure things out. But I think this is a new situation none of us have faced. So I encourage you to see what conversations you can have around that. Okay. So let's shift. Where's my arrow? We covered those. If there are other attributes of resilience for organizations that come to mind for you, I think I'd love to read them and hear them. Please feel free to put them into the chat as we go. So next, let me check my time here. Let's spend about 10 or so minutes in a breakout group so you can have a conversation about these topics. So first, what I would like you to do is think of a time you were on a team that was resilient, adapting or responding well to a change or challenging situation. And I'd like you to have a conversation to, again, draw from that appreciative stance of what do you already know about how to be resilient and what can you share with your team. So you're going to go into breakout groups. I think some of you will be with your sort of intact organizations or teams. And I think some of you will be grouped separately. That's based on numbers. Sometimes there's some single, if you will, folks from organizations. And Miriam is going to help coordinate these breakout groups in a minute. So when you're in your breakout group, was there a question?
Yeah, sorry. Some of them started going to the breakout groups, so they'll be back in 1 second. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
That was me getting a little quick.
You want me to wait until they're back?
Yeah, just wait for
okay.
It says 30 seconds.
Oh, right. It does do that 1 minute countdown.
So just as Tip mentioned, I did my best to put you all in rooms with people that you work with. However, some of them are divided up into random groups. And so hopefully, between brainstorm within your group and getting to know what other organizations are doing, you'll be able to flesh this out a little bit better. Okay, go ahead, Tip. Looks like everybody's back.
Welcome back. If you were in the breakout room, we're eager to get you into small conversations. So again, you'll have about 10 minutes. If you need to do some quick introductions if you're meeting someone for the first time. And then each person, I'd like you to just share like what enabled resilience in that example that you thought of when you've been a part of a team that did well in a challenging situation. And I'll say that, and to give you another option, if you're in an intact team and also just want to share really anything that resonated from these different attributes that you think are most relevant to your team, this is really 10 minutes for you to have the conversation that would be most helpful to you as a team. So I'm really letting have the conversation that you want to have. So option A, each person can share, what have they learned about resilience? What are the attributes? Or option B, if you just want to have a more open conversation about what's resonating for your organization based on these topics, feel free to do so. And I'll send out a 5-minute warning before the breakout ends. When there's 1 minute left, we'll send out another warning, and then you'll get a countdown. So just letting you know that it can be an abrupt transition when you come back, but we'll try to give you some warning. Any questions before we send them off, Miriam or Josie?
Yeah, people are saying that they were transferred to groups.
Yes, that's my fault. You guys will be going back to the same groups. I just got really excited and sent you there before time. So I'm going to do that now on purpose.
Excellent.
So when you are in your groups, you can see what people put over there. Introductions, name, location, years, organization. Each person shares what enabled resilience. And you will have a 5-minute warning before the end of breakout.
Okay, I'm hoping that Patricia was sent to the right group along with Wendy. Lynette. Lynette's room 8. Um, Good. Good. I'm trying to actually, Tony, I'm trying to figure out how to send you to another room, but since people are in those rooms, I can't tell if I actually can do that. Give me 1 second. Okay. For those of you that are not in a breakout room because maybe something happened or you joined when we sent the information out to everyone, I am going to be sending you to rooms right now. Hopefully they work out. Irene, Miriam, are you able to go to room 40? She might have gone.
Right. So if you're seeing me, you are in the main room. I don't see Josie or Miriam in here. So as a backup, while we're here, why don't we use chat and yeah, until Josie comes in and sends you off into breakouts. Yeah, I'd be curious, let's just share in chat what's resonating for you from these. Like what else would you add from your perspective about what enables resilience for organizations? And as we have a smaller group, if speaking is easier for you, please go for it. I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
This is Tony Hollingsworth. I'm in Mississippi with the Deafblind Project. I definitely went for the microphone. I think having a passion behind belonging to any organization, like finding value in the belonging, has to be present, or else, that, nothing would be worth it, regardless. So you have to have common vision, of course, but you have to have a sense of service to whatever that mission is, I guess, of the organization. I don't know if Carla Miller really left or not, or Rihanna.
Yeah, I saw her note. Tony, thanks for sharing. Yeah, so just that personal, that passion and commitment piece. Rihanna, I don't hear you. I don't know if others do.
I can't. I don't hear you yet.
And I don't think you're muted either. Oh, maybe. Sorry about that, Rihanna. Would have loved to hear your voice. So Tony had shared about passion as one of the attributes. That's a big one. I'm curious, what that makes me curious about is how does passion change? I.e. some, if the mission changes or if the scope of the organization or even the leadership and the culture changes. I don't know, for Tony or others, are there things for you, I guess my question is, that would either increase your passion or possibly decrease your passion in an organization?
This is Tony. I want to give time for others to respond, but I'm here. Who's Rihanna?
Got it. Thanks for typing in, Rihanna. From Washington State. Excellent. Yeah, I'm curious for the others, Russell, Ellen, Monica, Mike, just curious, more of a general check-in. Are you happy to engage here? Do you want to use chat? Do you want to hop on the mic and just share what's coming up for you? Or if folks are taking a break, fully okay. I see your text, Rihanna. Thank you. From Fiji. For Rihanna and Tony and others, I'm not sure if are taking a breather or a break, totally fine. Yeah, just curious, Rihanna and Tony, as you think about your organization, are there any areas that you feel like you all should be focusing on around these topics, around resilience? Like, do you feel like as a whole you're managing all these things pretty well, or does this get you thinking about something that you want to tend to?
Maybe while Rihanna's typing, this is Tony, I can just share. I'll try to keep this very brief. As a deafblind project, very slimly funded project, and all of us are across the nation, but I feel like I am constantly working on internal motivations and I mean, this whole process is a constant process. I have 1.25 staff persons for the whole state. And of course, you might not know this about these deafblind projects, but we serve students from birth to 21, 22 years old, depending on our state, regarding transition services. And so we're providing technical assistance to the adults around the identified children and youth. And so it's just constant conversation, constant application, you know.
Okay, tip, everyone is starting to return.
Alrighty. Yeah, thanks, Tony, for sharing. Give folks a minute or so to come back here.
Rihanna had written a few more things in the chat box, I think.
I can read that out. You know, Rihanna says, learning different cultures and values and not assuming why people do certain things in different ways is something we have been working on. Yeah, that's powerful, Rihanna. Josie, did you all close the chat breakout rooms? So can we expect that everybody will be back in here?
Yes, I am back. I was in a group and I am back.
All right.
We were having a very nice conversation.
Pretty much everybody's back. All the rooms are closed.
All the rooms are, okay, excellent. Yes, and Aaron, I see your text. There were some connection challenges. Cheryl, glad, thank you. So yeah, everyone's back. We've got about, let's say 10 more minutes on this session. I want to give you all a little bit more room to breathe between the next session. So just as a process check, I'm hearing some positive feedback from the breakouts. I'm glad those are helpful. Our apologies for things not being very smooth. As we said, we're learning the tech as we go a little bit here as well. So we'll stay in the full group. How about for those who were in a breakout room, because we actually ended up making this main room a breakout as well, but from those from your breakout room, can you enter into chat just what little reminders or what little wisdoms came up that you'd like to share with the full group so we can kind of maximize our learning?
Tip, would you like me to read them?
Please.
Okay, so we have one commonality. Ooh, people are all texting, that's wonderful. Let me scroll up. Okay, commonality was the ability to lift the self up when we lift up others. Another one. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Cindy. Our breakout was all colleagues, so we had a lot of time to discuss. There were new learnings that we had, even though we all work in the same organization. Yeah, I did that on purpose, Cindy. Let's see here. We are adaptable for sure. Then we have Miriam's daughter, Victoria. She loved the small groups. I received good advice from the group. We're able to learn to be adaptable. We all need to pull together to face challenges. My awesome group reflected on relationships, organization, clear roles, community, leaning in, helping each other, and stepping outside of our comfort zones. I have a couple more. Tip, We all grew and learned that we are resilient. Shared vision, improved communication, transparency, make sure all voices are heard, adaptability, creativity, and flexibility. Um, talked about how others were dealing with the challenges of working with students who had internships interrupted. Yeah, that's awful. The current COVID-19 situation was the most recent example of a resiliency work within a group while taking care of other constituents. It was also important to ensure we were taking care of ourselves. Absolutely. Adapting to all changes. Resilience is personal and does not have a timeline. Truth. The focus of meeting our staff's needs, of adapting to change in our lives, such as children being out of school. We have our organization host some staff check-ins that have included staff, children, and pets, yes, so that we can connect on a virtual level on how everyone is feeling. We are all interconnected and support each other. That is all really good information. And Tip, I think we figured out all the little quirks in the system. So if you want to do another breakout, we can.
Excellent. Thanks for reading, Josie. Thanks for the chats. Feel free to keep them coming as well. We probably won't do another one. I want to give folks a little break. So to check out as we close out, and before the end of my time, I don't know if y'all have your cameras on or would like to use the reaction, but I just like to give a round of applause to Josie, to Miriam, to folks who are interpreting, and others for helping us be resilient through using Zoom today. I think we've all done a good job there. So thank you all very much just for making everything happen and getting through this new construct. So to close out, let's do just as we began. I'm just going to invite you to take a minute to check in with yourself and reflect, and then I'm going to ask you to share in the chat a quick closeout. Let me stop sharing my screen because we don't need this for now. Okay. If you'd like, I invite you to let go of the things that may be demanding your attention if possible, and go ahead and just kind of take a breath, and you can lower your eyes if that's possible for you. And so we've made it through this session. I think we've learned a bit about Zoom and having over 100 folks on here, and learned about resilience and adapting in the moment. So I want to actually close with what's actually at the very end of the longer read ahead I sent, but what came up in some of the comments is that we already are resilient, and we are resilient. So the question is, how do we tend to our own resilience? How do we take our wisdom and share it and bring it forth to do the best work that we can? And the other piece too is, how do we care for ourselves when we may be working very tirelessly and rest seems hard to come by? So I'm going to invite you to check in with yourself and invite you to take a hand if you are able and so choose. And you can place it on your your chest area, your heart area if you like. Alternatively, you can choose to just sit or lay or stand with your palms open in sort of an open posture of being open to guidance and wisdom. And as you take an inhale, I want you to simply answer the question for yourself: what advice do you have for yourself in terms of caring for yourself in this time? And I'll ask you to be courageous and a little bit vulnerable, perhaps, but in the chat, if you'd like to share what came up for you there. You can open your eyes if you had them closed. So in the chat, what advice do you have for yourself, for caring for yourself in this time? All right, thank you for sharing in the chats. I hope folks are reading these, or I like doing this because sometimes what we need is also helpful to share, and it sparks something in what others need. So many of these are resonating with me. I love, somebody said cry somewhere. This may be a gendered thing, but that's something that I struggle with, right? Is sometimes we want to be so strong. And I heard a quote at one point that when you cry, it's not because you're weak, but it's because you've had to be too strong for too long. So that always resonated with me. Stretching breaks, absolutely, yes. Yeah, so with that, I'd love to sort of yield some time back to the clock so you all can practice some of these, take care of yourselves. So I'm going to hand it over to Josie and Miriam. If you'd like to keep in touch with me, I write and post on LinkedIn, and it's under my name, Tip, T-I-P, Fallon. Feel free to follow or connect with me on LinkedIn. But yeah, that's all I've got. So thank you all for having me. Thank you for the tireless work that you all do for yourselves, for your communities, and hope you have a great rest of the session. So, yeah, over to you, Miriam or Josie.
Thank you. I think I do hear a few people who are unmuted. If you don't want us to hear you, I'd suggest muting it. But Tip, I am so grateful for you sharing today, and this time to talk about our own resilience and also what we can build as resilience for all. So thank you again so much. And we will be taking a break until 2:30. So on my clock, that is 8 minutes. So do what you need to take care of yourselves, and we will get started very shortly. Thank you, Tip.
Thank you, Tip.
Ron, since we're on break, can you just, I want to make sure that we can hear you and share your video if you so choose.
Okay, can you hear me, Josie?
I
And Miriam?
sure can. That's wonderful.
Okay, good. I just stepped away from my desk for a minute. Do you want me to try doing my share screen too while we're away, just to make sure that works?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All righty.
Are you also doing your camera, Ron?
Yeah, I just turned it off because I stepped away from my
That's
desk for a
fine.
minute.
Yep. I just want to pin everything.
Okay, there we go.
Super. Looks good.
Show and beginning. Okay, now
Yep.
I won't be able to see the chat.
Okay.
So
I will.
could you
We will
or
keep an eye on
Miriam ask questions?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yep. Great. Yep. And then just feel free to interrupt any time for questions. I'm going to encourage people to ask questions throughout.
Okay. Well, then
Obviously,
you
wait till I
have
get a.
4 minutes to do whatever you need.
That's what I was. That's what I was just doing.
Yeah. All 4 minutes, Ron.
Yeah. So I'm done. I'm done like dinner.
That's right. Okay. I'll be right back as well.
All right. You got 4 minutes, Josie.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. I hope that you had a few minutes to get up and stretch and get some more coffee or whatever your choice of beverage is. So I have the privilege of welcoming Ron Hager, who has been a friend of the Raise Center since we started, to present with us on public policy. And Ron has presented every year at our summits and is definitely one of the favorite presenters and has so much to share with us from a federal level. So Ron, thanks for joining us. I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Josie, and welcome everyone. For those of you who have seen me over the years from time to time at the face-to-face, you may recognize my tie. This is my favorite children's tie that I frequently wear. This is a public policy update on what's happening in DC, as Josie said, and I am the managing attorney for education and employment at NDRN, and I've worked with the RAISE project since the beginning, as Josie said. I also do a lot of work with the other parent training programs across the country. So we're going to be talking a lot about the COVID-19 issues this year. Obviously, it's kind of sucked all the air out of the room. And there have been a number of bills that were passed already, 3 so far that have gone all the way through and have been signed into law, and a 4th one that's pending that we'll talk about a little bit. The bills that have passed so far have a lot of provisions for people with disabilities, which we'll go into, but they've also included some issues that have a tangential positive effect on people with disabilities, including increased Medicaid funding, increased funding for the Home and Community-Based Services Program, HCBS, expanded family and medical leave, and increased funding for housing. I am going to encourage you to ask questions in the chat box as I go forward today, and I can't see the chat box, so either Josie or Miriam will send those questions my way. So please, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. So beginning with, my favorite topic, which is special education, and how COVID-19 has impacted special ed. As you know, everyone's gone home. They did virtual schooling almost universally across the entire country. A number of school districts have already ended the year. However, the Department of Education, with a couple blips, have made clear that school districts are required to continue to provide services under the IDEA. There is built into IDEA itself a lot of flexibilities that school districts and states can have. There's been a lot of push for waivers and excuses and things like that. So one of the first things that we've done at the advocacy level is to try and push back on the need for waivers. So we'll get into that in a lot more detail in a couple of minutes. So getting into that right now. When COVID-3 was passed, which was referred to as the CARES Act, there was a language in that bill that specifically asked the Secretary of Education to publish a report outlining requests for waivers that she thought might be necessary under both the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, and the Rehabilitation Act, VR services. Her report was published, and we were shocked because there was a lot of push from the school district side for we need thousands of waivers, hundreds of waivers. Both the school district and VR agencies were asking for waivers. And she only asked for 2 waivers. And they were very, very, very minimal. The first one was to extend the IDEA Part B transition evaluation timelines. So for example, a child that's going from Part C, the preschool program, to the school age program, they're supposed to do evaluations and make a decision about eligibility for Part B. And if someone's, in that transition right now, can't really be evaluated in any face-to-face way. So what do you do with that child? Do you just leave them hanging there? So the proposed waiver would allow a school district or Part C program to maintain that child in the Part C program while this thing's going on. We would argue that you really don't even have to do that. You could just provide services based on the information you know. You've already got, a number of years of information about the child. You could just go ahead and develop an IEP for that child now. But that was one of the waiver requests. The other one was a deferral of repayments for people that had received grants or loan deferrals under the Personal Development Scholarship Program. No one really has any objections about that. Our main issue with these waiver requests is, we know that there's a lot of desire to open up idea, to try and water it down. And so we're fearful that anytime you try and change anything in the statute, you could get into that problem. So we've really been trying to push back on the need for waivers. Now, COVID-4, which has not been passed out of the, it's not been touched in the Senate, but did pass out of the House. And I spelled the name of it wrong. Now I can't even find my notes where it's spelled right. But anyway, it's the acronym is spelled wrong, but that's okay. We were fearful that these requests for waivers would be picked up in the House, which really wasn't that much of a concern for us. But our concern was more that the Senate, we were being told by Senate staffers that there was a lot of push to have waivers at the Senate side. So having no waivers in the bill that passed out of the House is very helpful for the Senate. So definitely keep your eye on what's happening. Right now it's on hold. Maybe they won't even get to it. We don't know right now. I'm using the phrase advocate, but you can definitely educate your legislators and policy and other people about that there isn't really any need for waivers, and this is really something that's very important to you. So please feel free to educate your policymakers on that. So on the IDEA side, there was only two questions, two waivers. On the Rehab Act side, there was 4 waivers requested, 2 of which we thought were significant. And the first one, which is the third bullet on the page, is the one that we're most concerned about, which is that the Secretary proposed waiving the requirement that states reserve not less than 15% of their funding, total funding, for pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities. And you probably know that, the VR agencies have been complaining about this since day one. In many states, they're not really even still fully implementing those provisions. So the last thing we do want is a waiver of this. Now, to be clear, it's not a waiver of the requirement. The VR agencies are still required to comply with the pre-employment transition program, even though they're doing it remotely. This waiving the set aside. Now, as I said, there was proposed, but in the House they didn't include any waivers, so this was not included in the House bill. The other waiver that she was asking for was a waiver. There's 2 different types of supported employment programs. This is the state program. They were asking that the state would be able to waive part of their allotment under that program. Not as critical as the pre-employment one, but again, that did not get into the House bill. As I just said, no waiver of either Rehab Act or Special Ed waivers in the House bill. Again, you can inform policymakers about what's going on, how important it is for pre-employment transition services, how students with disabilities still aren't getting the types of transition support that they need. The last thing we want to do is waive any of the requirements for this program. Now, this is literally hot off the press, not on my PowerPoint because it just happened yesterday and I just found out about it today. It's another IDEA waiver that OSER's, Office of Special Education Rehabilitation Services, is allowing. It's not a huge deal, but the way federal funding works, and you guys know this because you're probably on the same type of system, you get funding in year 1, you're supposed to spend it during that year. If you don't spend it, you get an extra year to spend it. So you have 2 years to spend 1 year's funding. Well, what's happened is school districts for their 2018 funds should have been spending that by the end of 2020. If they haven't already spent that, what the heck? If they're complaining about not having enough money, how could they not spend it? But anyway, they're giving a waiver to allow states to have an extra year to spend their 2018 money. So instead of being due in 2020, it will be due in 2021. Again, it's hard to imagine any school district or state that's not spent their 2018 money. So,
Ron, we have a
yeah.
couple questions. The
Okay,
one
yeah, the talk is
is,
fast, sorry. Go ahead,
no, that's
Josie.
great. Does the HEROES Act address any increased federal funding for state departments of ed?
The House bill, I think, has some additional education funding. We are trying to get more idea-specific funding. I can't tell you specifically the answer for whether the HEROES Act includes that or not. And we're going to just get into the 2019, the COVID-3, the CARES Act, and what they did on additional funding for education agencies. But we're trying to get more specific money for IDEA, because that was not covered in COVID-3.
Okay, and then the other question, which I don't think is specific to these funding bills, is are they considering using some of the 15%, I assume, transition funds for transportation and technology?
You know, it's a good question. Under the Rehab Act program, there are very specific ways in which the VR agency is to spend the pre-employment service funding. And the department came out with a memo right around the time of COVID about explaining what other things could be done with that money. And the main one that they focused on was accommodations for a person with a disability to enable them to access their pre-employment transition service. I can't remember if transportation was explicitly mentioned as an example, but it's not covered directly in the regulations. So if the interpretation itself included transportation as an example, that would be very clear. They were talking about assistive technology examples and other types of accommodations to students with disabilities to access the program. I just can't remember if transportation was included. And Josie, if you want to email me, I can check on that later and get back to people.
We have another question for you. You are on demand here. Okay, so I'm quoting this. So Ron, special ed question. New York State has voluntarily opened up face-to-face ESY. On 8/53, school was told by the district that they will not transport. Is this a FAPE issue?
Yes, I mean, the definition of transportation is if it's necessary to participate in an educational program. So it's not always a FAPE issue, but if someone needs ESY services, it's probably pretty much hard to imagine that they wouldn't also need transportation to get to that program. But it would be an IEP team decision. So if they've made a blanket prohibition and not even allowed an IEP team to consider it, that itself is a violation, a systemic violation.
And no other questions at this point, but if anyone is interested, there is some information that Sally provided about the HEROES Act. All right, that's it.
Great, and she probably spelled it right too. Okay, so going back to COVID-3, the CARES Act, and what they did include in that law was there was $30.6 billion education state stabilization fund, which was really broad, and then a $13.2 billion additional fund for elementary and secondary school education, and then an additional $3 billion for a governor emergency relief fund. So all those funds are available to the state education department and the local school districts to help them with COVID relief. The state is allowed to maintain 10% for its own administrative costs, and the rest goes to the local education agencies. It goes from the education department to the state education agency to the school district or LEA, and the distribution formula, both in terms of what each state gets and what each school district within a state gets, is based on the ESSA, the ESSA, every student succeeds at formula. So it's different monies, but the percentages are allocated pursuant to the Every Student Succeeds Act. Now, this is the one that we really want to focus on, the $13.2 billion in K through 12 relief. There's a ton of stuff in there, including, buying masks and all these other things for people. And I want to just focus on a couple of points here, purchasing educational technology and how to enhance online learning during school closures, which we know is a huge issue across the country, more so in the less affluent areas than in the more affluent areas. So there is, in the states are given flexibility in how they use this money. So I'm just going to point out a couple of these. So increased technology, and the last bullet, giving school leaders the resources that they need to support the needs of special populations in their school districts, including English learners, low-income students, students with disabilities, and homeless students. Prior to COVID, we know that this group of students was already struggling, already behind, already not getting what they really needed. With COVID, it's just done nothing but exacerbate these inequalities. So one of the intended purposes of this $13.2 billion is to support these students to make sure that their needs are being met. So a couple of other ones, purchasing, this is the one that I was kidding about, purchasing supplies to sanitize school buildings, mental health services, which was also a good one, summer programming, again, for students with disabilities, English learners, low-income students, migrants, and other vulnerable groups. So I skipped that slide, sorry. So anyway, we are advocating that people in each state check and see what's being done in your state, if the money's already been allocated, and if not, to try and focus the attention of the state in its allocation of the money to focus on meeting the needs of the most vulnerable populations. Definitely important to work in coalitions in your state, to get involved in this process, to make your voice heard. So definitely encourage you, if your state has not yet allocated its money, to take a look at what's happening in your state. Additional information about COVID-19 responses. First is the HEROES Act, which is HEORES. That's where I have it. As I said, it passed the House, but it's kind of on hold in the Senate. So that's the first question to look at, is the HEROES Act funding and waiver issue. Other things independent of the statutory scheme is school reopening plans. More and more school districts are getting, or states are getting their policies together, school districts as well. How states and school districts are going to be determining comp ed and extended school year services. Again, I would encourage you to get involved in coalitions, to be working with your state education agency, to be at the table, because we know that once the schools reopen, there's going to be a huge influx of cases. The PNA, the Protection Advocacy Agencies, are expecting that. Many of them are already working with their parent training centers. If you haven't heard from your PNA, I would encourage you to reach out to them to try and work together on how you're going to handle this overflow. But if you can do systemic policy work to answer a lot of the questions at your state about how this is going to happen, hopefully that might reduce a little bit the number of individualized cases that might come in. We have not heard anything yet from OSEP about any of these school reopening types of issues. My feeling about this is students with disabilities, the vast majority of them spend the vast majority of their day in regular education, and no one got what they needed, including students with disabilities. So a school district that's rational and trying to cope with catching students up should be developing a plan for all students, that helping them to catch up. It might take a whole year. They lost, depending on how well the school district did, they could have lost up to a quarter of their last school year. Some school districts may have done a lot better, so they didn't lose all that. But anyway, take a look at the plan for the regular education students and ensure that the students with disabilities are part of that plan, and get any accommodations that they may need to participate in that general education program. Then look at the possibility for students with disabilities that might need more than that. That would be where the comp ed or extended school year would kick in. It's a way to kind of reduce the number of issues they have to confront from the special education department and also the school district itself. It puts the students with disabilities where they should be, which is in the regular education milieu, but then it also does account for the individualized needs that they might have to help them catch up because of the added shortfall that they may have experienced because of their disability. There's also issues on maintenance of effort. The way the law is currently written, states have the ability to get a waiver of their requirements to maintain their state and local funding. And there is built right into the idea itself provisions for waivers like this. The school districts have their own waiver provisions, but at least the way most are reading the statute, it doesn't cover the types of examples you can get a waiver for are not covered. So there's a huge push now to try and get a waiver, a different waiver built into IDEA to cover this. And again, we just don't want it. We just don't want IDEA to be opened up. There's also been proposals from the Department of Education about using some of this CARES Act funding for individual student or parent-based funding, which we think is another way to think about an alternative way of talking about a voucher that isn't a voucher. Excuse me, any questions, Josie?
Nope, we're still good.
Okay. All right, so COVID-19 and the supplemental nutrition program, can't remember exactly what it stands for, food stamps. We have been trying to get, at NDRN and other advocates have been trying to get, there's a pilot program that allows food stamp recipients to purchase their groceries online. And we've been trying to get the Department of Agriculture to expand that. We don't believe they need a statutory approval to do this, but they've been refusing. So we've built in a couple of bills to try and get that to happen, to expand this pilot program nationwide. And then the other bills are trying to expand access to services and access to funding. But I talked to our person that does our food stamp related types of policy work, and he said none of these bills are going anywhere, unfortunately. So there's a lot of opportunity here, but right now, not much is happening. But we think that these potential provisions could be very helpful. Restraint and seclusion, I can't not talk about this. As you probably know, there is no federal law. There has been no federal law. It's been a couple years since a bill was introduced. This current Congress has been working to try to introduce a bill. We had a subcommittee hearing in last spring, and there's been ongoing negotiations. I think what they're trying to do is come up with a bill that everyone can accept and live with, both the teachers and administrators and parent and disability groups and advocates. And it has not been going too well. To be honest with you, in my humble opinion, at least from the school side, the teachers unions have been a huge barrier. I believe that they're afraid that if we take away restraint and seclusion, we're in some way tying their hands behind their backs for what they can do when they confront a student that may be behaviorally acting out, which is silly, but that's what they're pushing. The GAO, Government Accountability Office, also recently released a report on the reliability of the restraint and seclusion data, kind of showing it isn't reliable. Everyone knows that, so they made some specific recommendations about how to get this is the data that's reported to the Office for Civil Rights as part of their Office for Civil Rights data collection. And we've been trying to get this data more reliable. We have pretty good data. It shows how bad it is, but we believe the incidents of restraint and seclusion are even worse than the bad data already shows. So we're trying to get higher levels of reporting from the school districts on the true incidences of restraint and seclusion.
Hey, Ron, we have one request to repeat what you said about the PNA working on the issues of compensatory services and the extended school year.
Right. So what's happening is in many states, they're beginning to discuss the plans for how we are going to do this. And so a lot of the protection advocacy programs are working at the state level to help and be at the table on these plans. And I'm encouraging you as parent training centers to also get in at that table. That's one kind of collaboration. And the second one is actually in representing clients that are calling about concerns about not getting what they need. And again, I would encourage the collaboration between the PTI and the PNA.
Another from Peg, a question about the restraint and seclusion in reopening schools with the risk of wearing masks and being restrained or secluded.
That's a huge concern that we have, not just being restrained or secluded, but excluded. You know, students that have different types of behavioral disabilities that have been in varying degrees of structure at home, not in school, that, you know, when they return to school in the fall, they could be acting out. And we have two fears. One is that school districts may just say, we know you're going to have trouble. You're not even going to come in the door. You're going to just have to go wherever. And then the second concern is they come in, the school district is not prepared to handle them, and then they either do something, the student does something, and then either the student is disciplined or restrained or secluded or put into a more secure or segregated setting. So part of this reopening plan that the school districts are engaging in needs to consider the appropriate way of managing these students with behavioral issues that are now coming back that may need enhanced support, independent of combat, really, to really give a smooth and transition back to a new environment. And we may see students that never had issues of behavior before that now are exhibiting behavior. So we're very concerned about the need to not just look at academic issues when schools are looking at the reopening plans, but also to look at behavioral and mental health issues.
And I think, Ron, as a follow-up that was mentioned here, there's obviously concern with what's going on right now in the police system of the breathing issue. So with individuals, students wearing masks and the potential use of restraint, is there anything being said about those practices and students wearing masks?
That one I have not heard. More what I have heard is students that really can't keep their mask on, or that not because of health reasons, but because they just fidget and all that. So like me, I can't keep a mask on. So the concern is that they're going to be suspending these kids because putting their mask on, not putting their mask on. I have not heard about the issue of restraint, but obviously that adds a additional concern if someone is restrained about how it will enable them to breathe. The other thing that's happening, you mentioned the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. A number of school districts are actually reducing their school resource officer presence and actually eliminate it altogether. The goal here is to ensure that the funding doesn't just go away, but that funding is allocated to behavioral and mental health needs of the students. So if the school districts that don't have to pay the school resource officers have a really viable plan to really use that funding to really individually meet the needs of the behavioral needs of students, that would be huge, because one of the reasons why students act out is because their needs aren't being met, independent of whether they have a disability that might make them more likely to act out. Acting out as a behavior, as communication. And typically that's the problem, that the school is not paying attention to what the student's trying to say in their behavior, and then it explodes into a emergency. The goal is to get the students, to get the staff to understand the student, to enable the staff to prevent those kind of things from happening. So it's not really a direct answer, but it's the best I got. All right, so the Higher Education Act, here the goal has been to get more protections for students with disabilities in colleges themselves, as well as to get better teacher preparation programs in place. There was a lot of competing bills that were like miles and miles apart. There still is a goal to have this happen in this Congress. However, you know, with everything being sucked up with COVID, it may not happen. I think the original goal was to try and get something done. I think I may be wrong, but I think because of Alexander retiring. But I may be wrong about that. But anyway, that's not going anywhere right now. Excuse me. Competitive integrated employment. The definition of competitive integrated employment in the WIOA is a lot stronger than it's ever been before. They never really had a formal definition of competitive integrated employment. You had to look over here for the definition of competitive, you had to look over here and here and here for the definition of integrated. So they put it all together in one spot. And the statute itself is very strong, and the regulations implemented are even stronger. So that and the issue is not really about competitive. The fight is more about the definition of integrated. The way that the system is now defined is if you had a group of people, a work group, like say, for example, a cleaning group that went in to clean, went out, and they were all people with disabilities and they didn't really interact with anyone, that is a model that is being used by a lot of vendors. The definition of integrated would not allow that to happen. And then the group itself, that work group itself would need to be integrated. So you're gonna be walking in like this together, people with and without disabilities, doing your little job and then leaving. You don't have to integrate with people that aren't there if you're in the middle of the night. Your work group has to be integrated. And when we met with Mark Schultz, the Assistant Secretary, he said, in his view, that the business model that I described, the intent of WIOA is to stop using that business model. The problem is the people that are using that business model don't want to change their business model. Now, the irony is, the only thing that was really changed was how the VR agency could successfully close a case. There's nothing that would prohibit a VR agency to fund someone going into that kind of a program to help build their employment skills. And there's nothing that would prohibit a person with a disability from choosing to, stay in one of those programs. The only thing that the WIOA does not allow VR to make that a successful case closure. So a lot of this, fluff about, oh, this is terrible, it takes away choice of students and families, doesn't take away anyone's choice. It doesn't prohibit anyone from using this model. It just prohibits the VR agency from calling it a successful case closure. And I think the fear is, and we hope that it's true fear, is that if the VR agency can't successfully close their case, they're going to push for more integrated models. The whole goal, as Mark Schultz said, is to change the business model. So there's a lot of pushback on that, and we've been pushing back just as hard. So far, nothing's happened. We're still hopeful that there won't be any change to the current regulation. A couple of other hot topics that have been around for a long time are issues related to sheltered workshops and sub-minimum wage, which is the 14C certificate. The Department of Labor currently has the authority to issue a 14C certificate, which allows a holder to pay less than minimum wage. There's been a lot of push, obviously, about that. There's two bills, the Raise the Wage Act, which is a general raising of the minimum wage for all people. That act also includes a phasing out of the sub-minimum wage certificate. The other bill that we're more happy about also includes the 6-year phase out, but it also provides grants to states to help develop better models to support people when those 14C certificates end. And it requires a national TA center and also requires reporting and evaluation. The last thing we want is a shelter workshop to close and everyone goes home and sits on their hands, or they end up going to day hab. We want, as states, independently of the federal government, and also if the federal government acts, we want the whole infrastructure in the state to ensure that people that were in sheltered workshops have the support they need to transition into competitive integrated employment and aren't just left standing. So that in each state, you need to look at what the barriers are in your state. Who funds what? What does this happen? There was a question before about transportation under special education. Medicaid funds transportation to Medicaid approved programs. They don't, which is not a, business on, Main Street USA. So how is that student or person going to get to the job? So part of the package of ensuring a smooth transition from a sheltered workshop to mainstream integrated employment is dealing with that and other issues. The ABLE Act, the Achieving Better Life Experiencing Act, allows for creation of accounts that you could put money into this account, and the money that goes into that account is invisible for virtually all federal benefits programs, and it allows the person with a disability to build up resources that they may need for paying for disability-related expenses. And the definition of
Ron,
disability...
maybe it's just me, but I am having trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry, it's probably because my thing is down here. Is that better?
Ron, can somebody mention in the chat box if anyone else is having trouble hearing Ron?
Am I off?
Okay,
Am I gone?
Just me. No.
I hear him fine.
Oh, good.
Me too.
Okay, I was worried
Okay.
because we've been dropping
Something
calls
wrong
all
on my
day.
end.
So,
Sorry, Ron.
all right. So anyway, the ABLE Act allows for these accounts to be created, and it's a very, 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 very helpful program because it's very open-ended about what can be done with the funding in the account. The problem with the bill is that you have to have a disability with an onset day age before 26. And the reason they did that was at the time they were fearful that it would be too much of a drain on the federal budget if they had it open to everyone. Now they're seeing that it's not having that impact. So there's been bills sponsored to try and raise the cap or eliminate the age cap. So any person with a disability, no matter when they acquired the disability, would be able to take advantage of the ABLE Act. So far that has not happened. The ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, passed in 1990. This is the 30th year anniversary. The provisions of the ADA all went into effect by 2 years later, 1992. There's still these problems with many, many, many programs and activities not being accessible. There's been a lot of what we'll call drive-by lawsuits where somebody just goes in and sues like everybody, many times for minor technical violations, even though basically the program might be accessible, and tries to basically hijack that program to get an attorney's fee. So both Republicans and Democrats have been pretty upset about this in many states. And so there's been bills over the years to require, before you can file a lawsuit under the ADA for accessibility, you have to notify that entity and give them a chance to correct it. Doesn't sound bad, but our point is they should have been doing this for 28 years. On the other hand, you do have these people that are taking advantage of the ADA. So, we're proposing that, the lawyer, bar associations and others kind of police in some way the people that are, abusing the law for their own, literally for their own financial gain, just to get their attorney's fees. So far right now, thankfully, that bill has not been going anywhere. But another idea of the need to educate your policymakers. The Accessible Voting Act of 2020, still dealing with tensions, if you will, on ensuring access to the vote for people with disabilities. This bill would establish an Office of Accessibility, would fund voter accessibility upgrades, would allow the P&A programs to do litigation under the Help America Vote Act. Right now we have funding to advocate under the Help America Vote Act, but we can't do litigation. It also would protect individuals who are subject to guardianship to ensure that their rights to vote are not removed. So it's a very good bill. Again, with everything else that's being done right now, We're not sure if anything will happen with it. There's another issue related to the ADA and voting, which is that we've heard in many jurisdictions, they've been using the inaccessibility of polling places to close polling places. And excuse me, instead of opening a polling place in an accessible location, they've just closed it altogether. And so we did a report called Blocking the Ballot Box, looking at that, and we call it misusing the ADA as an excuse for closing polling places. And so that report is available on the NDRN website. There still remains a tension between accessibility and ballot security. The easiest way for people with disabilities to have the access to a independent ballot that they can cast and verify, yes, I picked these candidates and I can look back and say, yeah, I didn't make any mistakes, is electronically, digitally, because that's the most, it covers the most different types of disabilities, so that is the kind of the model ideal platform for voter accessibility. The problem is that the security people probably rightly say that the digital version is the most insecure. So they've been pushing for marked paper ballots, which are the least accessible. So there's been a lot of tension on this issue. And Michelle Bishop from our office, who is our voting rights person, has been the rock star on this, if I will. She actually testified at a public hearing. I think it was on Monday. So there's this tension between the ability to cast an independent ballot with the issue of ballot security. I don't have anything else. So are there other? I can't believe I got through all this quickly. But anyway, I did. So
yes.
I'm very happy to take questions from you. Obviously, if it's related to what I covered today, that'd be good. Also, we have some time if you wanted to ask some other questions of me that aren't related to the specific topic. Josie, just kind of cut me off and run me out of town when it's time to end.
Okay. So anyone who has any questions for Ron, please put them in the chat box now.
And I can hit the stop share too, I guess, so I can see questions now.
Okay.
There I am. Look at me. Wow. I didn't know I was that big. You can definitely see my tie.
Are you able to see the chat box now, Ron?
I can.
Good. You're just getting applause.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I always love doing this. And I appreciate all the work that you do. As Parent Training Centers, I was on the board of Parent Network in New York for 10 years. Did a ton of training with the folks there for many, many, many years.
Here's one. What can parent centers do to support work related to underreporting of isolation/restraint?
Well, the first thing you can do is look at the most recent OCR CRDC report by district in your state to see what the districts were reporting, and then using your head knowledge, using your networking, find out if in fact there's a lot more than they said there were. And then I would work in coalition, but I think that ultimately it's going to be the Department of Education that will be addressing this. So yes, OCR is still looking at underreporting, as Peg said, so that following up with OCR about that information, it's probably better to work as a group on that. And we have met with them from time to time, so we could even do a joint venture on this, because that is how OCR has found some of these issues, is with people telling them. When Los Angeles reports 0 issues of restraint or seclusion, I think OCR can figure out that there's underreporting going on, but sometimes they don't have that level of information in some school districts. So that's a good recommendation.
What are the best ways to follow and stay up to date on all that you shared, except calling you?
Well, I would say 2 things. One, use the SIPR. If you're an independent, if you're a PTI that's connected to the SIPR, use RAISE project and their material that they send out to keep yourself informed, because that's really what they're funded to do. Both RAISE for the PTI funded, specifically RSA funded PTIs, and the SIPR for all the PTIs. And so you can have regular public policy updates from them, either through blasts or other electronic means or other webinars and things like that. So definitely that would be a way to keep up on this kind of stuff.
Thank you for sharing our information there, Ron. We do try to keep up with everything. And when Ron or NDRN sends us info, we do try to share that. There is a comment, we've had students turn 21 during COVID-19 hiatus, and schools are suggesting that they are done, even though they may have not met their IEP goals. Obviously, this sounds ludicrous, but it's being done. Any thoughts or feedback on that, Ron?
Well, there's 2 issues here. The one follow-up is, do you think we're going to get any guidance? I don't think we're going to get any guidance, but if a student graduates, quote unquote, the school district says, here's your diploma, that's considered a change in placement, which is subject to due process and stay put. So that's clear. If a student ages out and they're no longer eligible for services because they turned 21, I think it's less clear about whether they can challenge that and go back and ask for compensatory services to make up for what they didn't get. I would pursue it and let them, come up with a legal argument about that, they've lost that right. I think that it's from my recollection of the different circuit court decisions across the country, I think that might be an open question. Certainly, if they filed the request before they turned 21, that would be better. Unfortunately, probably most people didn't even know until it's already too late. But definitely, talk to your, lawyers in your state, whether it's the PNA or if you have connections with other attorneys that do this kind of work, to see if they have more specific state information on that. It looks like there's some other suggestions about how to stay up to date on this stuff from the in the chat box.
Okay, we have a question from Adam. I'm going to unmute him for a second. Adam, you are unmuted.
Hi, this is actually, sorry, my bad. This is actually one of Adam's caregivers. We're in different locations, but I was wondering if you could unmute Adam Shan's window.
I will try to. If you mute yourself, is Adam signed in as Adam?
Yes, he is. He's under Adam Shand.
Okay, I'm gonna mute you.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Ron, and if there's another question, go ahead and answer it while I find Adam.
I don't really see anything in the chat box right now.
I just found him. Sorry, Adam. Hi.
I don't need to both of your voices. Sorry, I'm late. attend the meeting. The comment I had was I did catch a lot of your PowerPoint, Ron, that was very informative. We are getting ready to do a Q&A with our community next Wednesday for all of New Mexico. So what you covered is gonna be really helpful and really insightful. And I was wondering, when will there be a recording of this PowerPoint, or can I get a copy of it? And
Both, Adam. Yeah, both are true, Adam. So this PowerPoint, if you look in the files, I think Miriam could share it one more time. We have all the slides from the first presenter, Ron, and the short presentations after this. But also we will be posting the captioned version of this on YouTube within the next week or two, and we'll share that.
Sounds good, and it's nice to see you again, Ron, and as always, you did an amazing job, and nice to talk with you as well, Jesse.
Yes, thank you so much, Adam.
Thanks. And then I did scroll up a little bit and I saw a comment from Peg about can they still make a claim for compensatory services past eligibility even if they age out or graduate? That would be exactly what they would be asking for. And the question would be, for sure there's no problem with after they graduate, and whether or not the aging out would be a barrier. And that's just when I can't give you a definitive, black or white answer on that last part.
Okay. Any other last questions for Ron? Otherwise, we'll have a couple-minute break here, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and I can get a break before I go to my next training. We're right in the middle of our annual conference as well, and we usually do it face-to-face, but we're doing it virtually. So we're doing the same thing that you are for the P&A program. So kind of interesting that we're doing it at the same time.
Of course
so Ron,
it is.
I just want to say hi, and yes, we would love for you to come back and get on Parent Network's board. It's good to see your face. And yes, I shaved out my hair out, so I'm gray.
I probably won't be able to do that, but definitely, anything I can do to help, let me know for sure. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, Ron, we really appreciate you joining us. As always, your information is so helpful and so insightful. And thank you for taking time away from all your other busy work to join us. If you all do have questions later on that you think of after this that you would like information from Ron on, Miriam or I can definitely contact Ron, and hopefully we can help get that information for you. Otherwise, Ron, you're wonderful. We appreciate the help, and we look forward to the next time we meet with you.
Thanks, everyone. My pleasure, as always. And Josie, put in a thing about the 21 as well, just so I can maybe see if I can find a quick answer for that.
Hey, Ron, it's Peg.
All right.
I want to say thank you also on behalf of Raise, and I just wanted to put one bug in your ear too, as far as with the Black Lives Matter movement right now. Is there any kind of conversation around lifting up the disproportionality issue with SROs and with restraint and seclusion?
Yes, I mean, we've already put in our 2 cents, but we're trying to put together a more in-depth thing, especially the intersectionality of people with disabilities who are Black or members of other ethnic minorities. And yes, disproportionality in restraint and seclusion, disproportionality in discipline, disproportionality in segregated placements, disproportionality in under or over identification. Those are all things that we're going to, other populations besides education. So we're going to look at not just education, but other things. Black people who are disabled who are shot because the police had no clue what they were dealing with. which hasn't really been part of this conversation, but does happen also.
All right, well, keep us posted on those efforts, will you?
Okay, yeah, we'll probably be posting some more stuff on our webpage at some point.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
you
you,
so
everybody.
much, Ron. Okay, have a good one.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay, everyone. So that means we have a 5-minute break, all of 5 minutes. But the RSA PTIs will be presenting next. So if you are going to be the presenter from your RSA PTI, the 7 of you, just be ready. I sent you the order of your presentations, and I will be advancing your slides. So 5 minutes. Yeah, so right at 3:30 here, we will be starting again. Thanks, everyone. Okay, everyone. We will be starting here in just a second. While everybody returns to their computer, I just wanted to again thank our interpreter, Patricia, and our captioner, Wendy. You guys have been amazing doing all of this work, and thank you for stepping in to do it so quickly. As you guys know, they have been along the ride with Raise. We are funded by RSA, and we work specifically on transition-related issues. And we have the privilege of working with the 7 RSA PTIs that are spread out through the country. And these centers have worked on transition-related issues since 2014. And their projects vary a lot in the demographics that they serve, in the exact projects, and how they're run. And so because we have such a big group joining us at this summit, we wanted to make sure that all of you joining us could hear a little bit more about those centers. So the first center is New York State. And whoever's presenting from New York, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi.
It's Barbara.
Okay. Barbara, tell me whenever you're ready for me to advance.
Hopefully my teammates will join in. There's Sue.
We're here.
Annie may have had to drop off. She was having some technical difficulties. So I'm Barbara Glassman. I'm the Executive Director of Include NYC. And Sue, do you want to speak to you for yourself?
I'm Susan Barlow, and I'm from Parent Network of Western New York, a CPRC and a subcontract to a PTI under Sturbridge.
And Jenny, I don't think Jenny's on. So if you are, Jenny, definitely chime in. But we are 3 organizations that are across the strait that join together, all of which are federal parent centers. We're both PTI and CPRC for South Bronx and Northern Manhattan. And Sturbridge represents the upstate regions. So we had this collaborative, and you can advance, Josie. We only did 2 slides. That's just who we are. So I basically, I'm not sure what others did, but I basically included everything that we kind of the framework of our program during the last 6 years. Like all of you, we conducted regular needs assessment to inform our work, which resulted in what is below. And so we have, over the course of the 6-year project, have done nearly 60 tip sheets and conduct sheets, mostly tip sheets in English and Spanish. They range in a variety of topics, but we've done everything from safety and voting to pre-eds type work in terms of communications to, I don't know, all sorts of topics that are relevant. We have established a website to contain all of our information in one place. We have a very popular, which I think a lot of people see, which monthly news aggregate, which includes statewide news, statewide resources, and at the moment we put local events. It's been very effective, and each organization distributes it to their contact list. so that we can have statewide. This has been particularly interested in a COVID environment because everything can be statewide now because everything is virtual. So we've changed it up a little bit since we've gone virtual. We also have a coordinated statewide social media campaign called Transition Tuesdays, where we do a lot more self-advocacy, success stories, independence, and employment-related news. We've done a number of virtual learning communities, which obviously in today's environment are far more popular. But back in the beginning of this grant, people were less accustomed to engaging like that. But we've picked some interesting topics about health homes and supported decision making in our state, and some resource and one on mental health, which were quite well received. Another a unique project that we've done is we've back to back every other year. We either did local initiatives where we funded some more grassroots projects at CBOs. This past year, we funded 4 that were on things like, again, some pre-eds type work, some hospitality projects that are located in other parts of the state, not through parent centers, with CBOs supporting community-based initiatives. That's something that we've really enjoyed doing and think was very effective to getting to underserved or underserved communities. In other years, we've also funded videos and translations of materials into Korean and other languages. So we've really thought that that was an effective way to make sure that we were covering a wider, bigger group in a big state. And we've also co-sponsored, although this year it was canceled, an employment conference where we brought together parents through scholarships and youth to meet with providers and had some really effective panel discussions where providers got to hear directly from parents and youth about what their needs were. We had hoped to do that again this year, but it was supposed to be last week and it didn't happen because everything was virtual. So hopefully that can still happen at some future date. And we did that with the New York, they just changed their name, New York Alliance for Inclusion. I got the name wrong, Sue.
Oh, I always get the name wrong.
Yeah, because they just changed their name. So that's that was a nice initiative. So that's basically the overview of our project. I don't know, Sue, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I love to get to piggyback on what you talk about. So a couple things. One of the things about the local awards initiatives is there are little pockets around our state, but remember our state is both rural, suburban, and urban. And there are little pockets where there's an emerging relationship or a beginning stage of a relationship between a parent group and professionals. And I think one of the things I was excited about is some of the tiny bits of money we gave them a real watering on the seed to watch something grow and continue to grow. And I think from a capacity building perspective, that it felt good because then you start hearing more from them about activities that they're doing. The same goes for the panels, the parent panels. One particular one that sticks in my head is we had a diverse group of parents talking to vocational rehab counselors from the state as well as providers. And I was a little like, yeah, so what? But guess what? It wasn't so what, they were like on the edge of their seats. They loved, those VR folks loved hearing the parent perspective. And I still kind of hear from different people who were in that audience, and this was like a year, 2 years ago, you know, that was extremely rich. And so I think more and more, that's the kind of work in terms of building capacity. It builds the capacity of the providers to better work with our families. And it also builds our families and parents to better work with even regional organizations and more grassrootsy organizations. So that's kind of like my 2 cents.
Ladies, thank you so much, and keep up the good work. And as Sue put in the chat box, you can find their website online, and I encourage you to do so. So thank you both. Moving on to the Federation for Children with Special Needs. Nancy, are you there?
I am.
Great.
Can you guys hear
About
me?
3 minutes.
All right. So you can go on to the next slide for me, Josie. So you guys can all read this. The Link Center is what we're called. We serve the state of Massachusetts. So we are one center serving the entire state. So we do a lot of traveling. And, you know, our goal is to provide information and supports and services to youth and their families to help them meet their vision. And we do that. You can go to the next one. Through all of these things. Trainings around the state, we travel to every corner of this state and sometimes to the islands that we have. So we go a long ways. We have a conference, Planning a Life conference, which I'll talk about a little bit in the future here in the next slide. We have a partnership with the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. It's a family support project. So we don't just support families in that project, we also support the counselors, the VR counselors, helping them to better understand family engagement, because that's not a, you know, they're not taught that in school. I know that because I'm a VR counselor myself. So they're used to person-centered planning, and so it's been a change for them to have to work with families and students and young people. We do tips brochures, which I'll talk about here a little bit later. We started this live stream training series called Linked Over Lunch about a year ago. And we have someone come in, they're an expert in the field. They've been really great. They're 20 minutes. People can tune in then and just listen, or they can come back to the archive version, either on Facebook, on our website, or on our YouTube page. We have 2 youth strands at our Vision of Community Conference, which is a statewide conference. So we have a self-advocate strand, and this year we integrated a strand for young people who have a vision of going to college. So we had the Easter Seals teach that strand, and it was really, really popular, and we hope to do it again. We take emails, phone calls, technical assistance. Our website has resources, and then we do transition fairs across the state as well. And then we sit on about 12 advisory boards. So to kind of keep our fingers in what's going on across the state. So the Planning a Life conference started as a 2-day conference just around transition, and it was just the basics around transition, from need surveys and, you know, and evaluations from the 2-day conference. We determined that we weren't serving everybody. You know, there's so many different tracks that students can be on, and one conference can't really cater to everybody's needs, and the questions that our presenters were getting were so mixed that we decided to pilot new conferences. So we have one around preparing for college, which is a 1-day conference. We bring in college disability service people. We have outside resources around going to college. So we bring back in the Easter Seals College Navigator program. We talk extensively about the change in the law going from IDEA to ADA is really, really hard for parents to understand, because they really want to take that IEP to college and they can't. Then we have a 1-day intensive, Planning a Life, which we've done once. We had it planned again for March, but we weren't able to do it because of the COVID-19 public health crisis. But 2 days is hard for families. It's hard for me as an individual putting it on to do 2 days in a row. It's exhausting. It's a lot of time. And so we did a 1-day intensive, which was really popular. We also sent like supplemental materials before they came to the conference. So they got a lot of the mix of what we would do at a 2-day, but they could do that from home. I think that that will be carried on into the future. And then we had also planned, but unable to do, was a planning a life for students with medical complexity, because their needs are also much different than, you know, kids going into an 18 to 22 program, or kids who think they will be going to college, or kids who will just be going to work. So linked over lunch, these are some of the topics that we covered each month, with, again, having an expert in the field come and sit down and talk for 20 minutes. Every single one of them reached at least 1,000 people. One reached 4,000 people. And so we've been able to capture these and use them again and again for supplementing the transition or the Planning a Life 1-day intensive. I just sent all those videos to individuals who were registered, and so they could watch something on pre-ETS. Instead of having MRC come to the conference, they could watch the Director of Transition Services talk about pre-ETS. And I knew the questions that families were asking, so in that video, I'm questioning the director, and just the other things going on here. You can go on. Our tips brochures, this is a partnership with the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We have 2 new ones coming out. One is on pre-ETS and one is on a very specific Massachusetts law called the Chapter 688 referral process. But all of these are transition related. Most of them are taking DESE's, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's technical advisories, which can be so complicated, so many words on paper, and making them family friendly. All of these up here are translated into 5 languages. They're all on our website and they're all downloadable. They're really popular within the state. You know, I always encourage families to take them to IEP meetings because it's DESE's language in here. So they can say to a school, this is coming from the Department of Ed. So this is, you know, this is what they're telling us to do. So they're very user friendly. Going on, thank you. Oh, and that's it.
And that's it. Thank you so much, Nancy. Charmin, are you with us?
Yeah, I got thrown off there for a second, but I'm back on it.
Okay.
Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that was kind of scary. Okay, Pacer Center for the past 6 years has conducted what is called Project Launch, and our tagline has been the connecting of youth to communities, colleges, and careers. During these 6 years, we have partnered with 3 other parent training and information centers, which included Kentucky, that's KY Spin, Ohio, OCECD, the Ohio Coalition, and InSource, located in Indiana. And I think it has been a very fruitful partnership and a really great working group that we've had. Overall, what we've done is we've provided training and information to youth and families. Our major topics or areas have been employment options, post-secondary options, and independent living goals. So if you could give me the next slide, that would be great. And as we kind of look at what has been the 6-year highlight, I've kind of broken out in areas the way in which we have conducted much of the project and the way in which many of our partners have worked as well. So what we did is we had basic and special workshops that were conducted in urban communities and rural communities. So like I said, there would be very basic kind of trainings that would look at areas to underserved participants and populations, which included topics around employment, supplemental security income, and then we had also started live streaming even before the COVID-19 occurred. And so we were doing live streaming. And so some of those things that we would cover would be paths to employment, succeeding on the jobs, using technology to boost skills, looking at those soft skill kinds of areas that can make and break one either acquiring a job or losing a job when you stop to think about, or retaining or holding on to a job. And assistive technology that supports independent living for young adults, but then also technology that supports work as well. So, you know, like I said, basically we had the basic and the special workshops. Of course, that was determined oftentimes through kind of a formal or an informal needs assessment to determine what it was that communities wanted. In collaboration, we worked with, I think I mentioned to you who our 3 partners were that we worked with in the different states, but then also there was collaborations that occurred with vocational rehabilitation, centers of independent living, employers, career force, which is formerly the workforce centers, Social Security Administration, client assistance project, and in our case, the Minnesota Disability Law Center. But also with our partners, we also encouraged work with vocational rehabilitation and their centers of independent living, and particularly and oftentimes their schools, because there would be areas of transition that got covered. And I know, for instance, one of our partners in particular worked very heavily with the schools and student populations as well. As we looked at working with diverse families, one of the things that we developed or we suggested that we ourselves at Pacer Center, and then also maybe occurred at the other centers, is the whole idea of facilitating what are called workshops. We call them workshops without walls. I think over 4,000 or so participants were able to be included in this whole idea of workshop without walls. For instance, that may include doing an actual training or providing real substantive information by radio. And oftentimes, as we collected our data, we did find out that populations reached included African American populations, Hmong populations, Hispanic Latino populations, other Southeast Asian families other than just Hmong, Native American, new refugee immigrant populations, new to particular areas, particular states, and then underserved and other underserved and other represented populations. So this is kind of what was occurring there. Also, another key part of our project is the information, and I call it individual information and individual assistance that was provided. That is the answering of the phone calls or the talking directly one-to-one with a family member or a student about various transition information, client assistance programs, the Rehabilitation Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Ticket to Work, Work Incentive Improvement Act, employment legislation, and just the Workforce Center youth programs. So there is that individual answering of questions that do occur. This would occur particularly like if the PACER level where Project Launch was connected with the rest of the transition team. So advocates that looked at areas of transition, that looked at areas of employment, that looked at the areas of youth development, youth leadership, and that those were other staff, I guess you could say, or advocates that we had the opportunity to talk with. We also developed a video series. You can go up on the website and find some of the information for that. What happened is we had transition tips for employment, high expectations, make the work experience a priority, using your personal network. Employers want good employees and what that means, and learn what supports are available for employment. So that would be our video series. And then again, of course, I had mentioned earlier the fact that we had live stream presentations on assistive technology as well in collaboration with our Simon Technology Center, different live stream workshops that talk about tools and technologies that people can use to support themselves either in the work search process or once one gets onto a job. Also, technology tools around managing time, managing your own effort in that. And so many of those live stream presentations were archived. And so you can go to the PACER website and find that information. Some of the things are still there. And then again, there was just the website development. If you go project launch, and you will see our website, and on that we have listed some of our activities, some of our product and everything, so that makes it available to you. It has been a pleasure for working with our partners, working with our collaborators, and thank you, Rays, for all the work and the technical assistance we've been able to receive from you. Thank you.
Charmin, thank you so much. As you can tell, our groups are really passionate, have done so much work, and it's really hard to sum it up in just a few minutes. So thank you, Charmin, for sharing.
You're
welcome. Beth, are you with us?
I'm with you.
Okay.
And I'm going to try to sum it up in a few minutes.
Okay, thanks.
So we have our RSA Shift Transition Project at Peak Parent Center, which is the PTI in Colorado. Just kind of an overall framework from the past 6 years is that we spent time the first 3 years developing resources, training curricula, publications, a lot of different tools. And we also have a partner, a main partner was the Arizona PTI, who have been with us throughout all 6 years of the project. And so they worked with us in development of resources and looking at the needs of families, initially in both of our states, Arizona and Colorado. And then for years 4 through 6, we took it more broadly to a group of more parent centers. These are some of the individual things that we worked on and the services that we worked on and provided in Colorado and Arizona the first 3 years. And go ahead and go to the next slide, Josie. This just shows the other states that we ended up working with in the past 3 years, where we were providing them with technical assistance and also access to the resources and tools we developed. So, and certainly to support those parent centers to build on and enhance and extend their transition services to reach the outcomes that are needed for youth with disabilities and for their families. If you can go to the next slide, Josie. And these were some of the services that we provided as part of our technical assistance: a self-assessment and a transition strategic planning process with the parent centers, a community of practice that over the past 3 years has evolved to be something that we get a lot of feedback from the parent centers that they really appreciate that. We were meeting monthly for those 3 years until COVID-19, and we've actually been offering weekly now, weekly opportunities for folks to get together to talk about challenges, to share resources and ideas. I thought about this group a lot as the first speaker was talking today, about how important having a venue, virtual as it is, for parent centers to share peer-to-peer and to build and improve based on that. A part of that, it was also a listserv where folks could communicate with each other in between times. Specific technical assistance for implementing our curricula, project curricula. And in part, the purpose of that was for like another step of a piloting process. And this past year, we have actually spent quite a bit of time revising and updating our curricula based on feedback from the other parent centers' use of it, because we wanted it to be the very best that we could make it as we end the project and as the resources are disseminated. Coalition building has been a real important aspect of this between parent centers and the state and local related agencies, and of course to promote the kind of information and access that youth and families need, and tools that youth and families need in order to engage with and participate with these groups that are so important to their future lives. And then our repository of resources, and we've been building that throughout. Go ahead, Josie, to the next one. I think I've probably mentioned this, so I won't spend time, that this is just about our community of practice and some of the things we've done. And then go ahead, go to the final one, Josie. And these are some of the products that we have developed over these 6 years. As I said, we're actually in the process of updating our Parent Center toolkit of resources right now. We have added more of an emphasis, and just in the past several months have, with the help and with collaboration with our community of practice, shifting our transition workshop series into virtual training modules, and which of course is so essential right now. And it has pushed us to actually grow because virtual is important at any time, but especially now, and probably at least for a while into the future based on the current crisis. So, so we've had a really, we feel productive and exciting. We've learned a lot. We've learned what works and what doesn't work, and continue to learn. And we hope that it's made a contribution. And just as has been said already, thank you to Raise and to the kind of support you've given us. And we hope we can continue to be engaged to help enhance and better meet needs in this area in the future.
Great.
That's
Thank you
it.
so much, Beth. That was great. I know that some individuals are needing to jump off for meetings. That is okay. As we mentioned, we will have this recorded, posted, and shared with captioning within a week or so. And so if you miss anything, you can get it there, and you have the slide deck already, but I want to make sure that all of our parent centers have the opportunity to share. So if you're able to stick with us, please do. If not, check out the video. So Dawn?
You'll see one thing, people
Oh,
are
yes.
asking about the chat. Yes, we wanna share with everybody the chat content. Don't worry about
That's
that.
right. That's right. Thank you, Miriam. So I would highly recommend RSA PTIs to put your email, not email, your website address in the chat box so that people have it, since we will be sharing it with everyone. Dawn?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, great.
So hi everyone, my name is Dawn Monaco and I am one of the co-directors on Reach for Transition, along with Carolyn Hayer and Diana Otan at SPAN Parent Advocacy Network in New Jersey. And Reach is Resources for Employment, Access, Community Living, and Hope. We're a little different in that we are a collaboration between 9 parent centers in Northeast region. It's actually Region A now, it's changed. And we serve parents, youth and young adults with disabilities, as well as professionals under this grant. You can go ahead. So we are a community of practice because we do collaborate under our grant with these parent centers in Region A. And we get together face-to-face twice a year. But let me just backtrack and say that the first year of our grant, because as everyone knows, we're in our 6th year, we also did a needs assessment. And then based on that needs assessment, determine the work that we would do in the region. We do meet twice a year. Every year, our Region A meets and does a region conference in the fall. And under this grant, we started to have a pre-service day before the region conference, and we called it our Reach Day. And that day was dedicated to all things transition. So it was a nice way to get everyone together in the region to talk about transition, and then we just kind of went right into our region conference. And then we also, in the spring, we do a follow-up forum for the region, and we also instituted a Reach Day prior to that as well. So at those conferences, the 2 that we did, we would, each parent center would develop, in our region, under Reach, would develop what we call an action plan for them. And then they would base the work for the remainder of the year off that action plan. Us at SPAN, what we did underneath Reach was we facilitated 4 webinars and 2 train the trainers every year. So we were doing virtual before virtual was cool. And when I move forward, I'm going to show you some of the webinars that we've done, but that was a lot of the work that we did for Reach under SPAN. So we also developed what we resource repository, and we have close to 200 resources in that repository that everyone in our region can access or add to as they see fit. You can go ahead and move forward. Move the slide, yeah. So I already talked about this. I provided just a few quotes from some of the parent centers that were at the conferences, that they're saying that they loved getting together. You know, it's as great as this virtual is, we know that when we're together face to face, we can really do, it's just better. We get to see each other. Some other quotes, excellent content. I was able to get a lot of ideas. So it was really, I think, out of the whole tenure of the grant, I think us getting together twice a year was really a highlight for everyone. And it was nice to collaborate and share ideas and talk about what everyone is doing regarding transition. So you can go ahead. So this shows you some of the webinars that we've done. I did put our website there. I'll put it in the chat as well. And what I don't have there is the fact that we also now, especially since we've gone into our stay at home, really built up our YouTube channel. So we have a website on the SPAN website. We have a page for Reach, but it also links to a playlist. I have to get all the terminology right, on YouTube for all these videos. So every webinar that we, and Train the Trainer that we facilitated, it was recorded. It's all on our webpage. And I'm highlighting to the right there 2 specific webinar series that we did. The one in purple, you can't really read it that well, unfortunately, is the Sexuality and Disability 4-part series. And the nice thing about these webinars, I mean, it wasn't just me talking. I collaborated with so many different professionals in our state of New Jersey and in the region as well. So you'll see on this Sexuality and Disability, we had Peel Parent Center in Pennsylvania worked with us on that. We had 2 professionals who are sexuality experts in the field. One was on part 2, one was on part 3. The other one in the red, that was our most recent webinar series, which I collaborated with Maine Parent Federation, which is one of our parent centers in our Region A. And that was a really wonderful collaboration. Carrie Woodcock, who's the executive director, and Dylan Campbell, who's the youth coordinator there. It was wonderful to work with them, and we're going to try to work together again on other projects. But we did 4-part on supported decision-making, which was a really great experience. And under that, we did supporting youth and young adults to become supporters, talk about what that means. We, part 2 was incorporating skills into your IEP. How do you build supported decision-making skills and how you can do that in the IEP. We also did helping youth and young adults take charge of healthcare and what it is to be self-determined with healthcare. And then lastly, supported decision-making, a legal alternative to guardianship. So all of these webinars, as I said, are on our SPAN page. What we also did on this next page is we developed a very comprehensive family guide to transition services in New Jersey. This is also up on our SPAN website under the Reach page. And, you know, we've always had a ton of transition resources, but this was sort of a way to put everything in one place. There's also hot links in it. So when you go onto it, if we mention a website or a resource, it will take you to that. And the nice thing about working collaboratively with our region is that we, you know, why should we reinvent the wheel? So we've had several centers reach out to us and ask for a format so that they can go ahead and make their own state transition guide. You can go ahead. These are the 9 parent centers in our region that we worked with under this grant. And I just also want to say that one of the really great benefits of this grant was that how all of this work spilled over to the work that we do under our parent training and information grant. We have also a transition fair that we do, or conference, I should say, that we do every year in the north, central, and southern part of the state. And we've really enhanced, we always had a parent strand and a youth strand, but we've really enhanced our youth strand based on the work that we've done here. And we brought in some youth mentors to work with them and really help build and start young people to understand what self-advocacy is and how to build that so that they can be a self-determined young adult. And I think that's everything. And it's been a wonderful experience. I really loved working on this grant. I grew as a person as well as really learned a lot in the 6 years that I've worked on it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, John. And I do really recommend anyone to go to the website and check out their materials. So, Debbie, are you presenting this?
Actually, Lisa is. Lisa Bowles.
Okay, perfect, Lisa.
Hi, Josie. Thank you. Yeah, gosh, I'm just really excited listening to all of the works that everyone is doing with their, you know, the RSA funding, which I know I know that we have a mission for this, and that's and a love for what we do. And it's so exciting to see that enthusiasm that we have in Missouri is it's all over the place, and we can see that. I can see the work that's being done for youth with disabilities. And so just to tell you about what it is that we do, we have a program called Project Stellar, and I wanted to set a 5-minute timer. The goal is Stellar, supporting transition to engage lives by linking agency resources. And if you can just go to the next slide, Josie. What we do at Project Stellar, it's more than just helping youth and engaging with youth and the work that we do with them. It's also the work that we do, the collaboration that we do to put our events together. So what we have right now is, at this time, what we're running is our 2 separate large summits, and the rest we do, let's see, we have 23 regional transition networks, and we keep growing our regional transition networks, our RTNs. And I think we're up to 23 now. We added 2 last year, and you can see the map off to the side here. We still have some white parts that we want to keep filling in, and we've got some great staff that are doing some resource mapping to reach out to the different potential members of that network. So it includes a variety of individuals. Of course, we have impact staff and family and youth, but a lot of our RTNs have representatives from Centers for Independent Living, and most of them have somebody from Voc Rehab. We have schools, like the school districts, as well as local universities involved in RTNs. We have all of our local agencies, like our county boards for disabilities, and different service providers also who provide services for individuals with disabilities. What we do is we plan events. Most of the teams, now some of them more than others, but most of them meet on a monthly basis, and it's all regionally based. So you think Missouri, because a lot of people here, most people here are outside of Missouri, you think Missouri is just Missouri, but we have 2 pretty darn big cities, and then we have a lot of rural areas. So we have some medium-sized cities, I guess you could call them as well. Every single one of those is different. And what I love, and the beauty of the whole RTM setup, is that it is whatever your community needs. So, and just so you know, I'm a program coordinator, and I'm actually new to a leadership role. And prior to this, I was very, very involved as a regional coordinator with my RTNs. Prior to being with Impact, I was actually involved in RTNs, and I'm a huge proponent of them. I love working directly with the youth, and most of the people on the RTNs do as well. So we do assist youth with disabilities and their families with the post-secondary transition process. So now we talk about networking and collaborating. We talk about there's resource and referrals. We have these large summits, and then we have a series of smaller expos, reverse job fairs, what I call transition skills days, and we have these. It's only limited by our own creativity. So to give you kind of an example, the region I'm most familiar with is just one corner of the state, and we like to do transition skills days. But I also have groups that do resource fairs, and so it's sometimes it's learning and interactive, and most of them have vendors involved, so there's information dissemination going on from a whole lot of different places that we could be providing referrals to. Another thing too that's really good about RTNs is once you're working alongside the various members of that network, it's pretty seamless whenever you're making that referral. So I know that I know who the VR people are. You know, I know who the county board people are. I know who works at the Center for Independent Living, and I know what they do, because that's the other thing about RTNs is when we're getting together on a monthly basis, we're talking about trends. We're talking about what's going on. We talk about what we do. And a lot of us are, we're, without sharing names, talking about specific cases that we're working on. And these are great conversations to have. But yeah, the RTNs, they exist throughout the rural areas and the urban areas and the suburban areas as well. Josie, you can just move on to the next slide. So, and it's really about, so we have these collaborative partners, employers and business owners. A lot of them make donations to the events or volunteer at the events. We have Voc Rehab, Centers for Independent Living, the State Department of Mental Health, special education school district staff. So they will be involved not only in facilitating getting the students there, but also in communicating with us on what the needs are and trends are, and helping us to develop these plans. And we have CASA and Goodwill, and we have our pre-employment transition specialists, which are under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and our local Senate Bill 40 boards, Center for Human Services, and the Governor's Council on Disabilities. We have all of these people involved. Now, here's the challenge, because what happened was this year we had a whole bunch of events that were planned for the spring, and we were able to get some of them done before the COVID-19 crisis really hit our state, and we were able to postpone some of them, kind of use it as a reason to move what we were normally having difficulty getting it scheduled in the spring, and it turned out the fall was a better time to do it. So now would be a good time just to go ahead and switch to the fall. But I wish we had had more forethought. I mean, we have an online presence at Impact. So in general, we were able to do our webinars remotely, via webinar, excuse me, we were able to do our trainings via webinar. And we were able to work with people remotely, attend IEPs. As a PTI, we were able to do most of our functions, but because our RTNs are so locally based and they're so much in your neighborhood, that wasn't something that we were really prepared to change to the virtual world. But now that this has happened, we've got everything rescheduled, and everything is rescheduled with a contingency plan for going virtual. So at least most everyone that I'm aware of we're having conversations about how we could do a virtual conference and how that would look, or maybe the schools won't be able to, to bring the students in because they're doing social distancing. They don't think travel would be a good idea. That's fine. We've got it all figured out. We know how we're going to do this remotely. And as you can see, these conferences can happen remotely. Not that, I mean, I would have loved to have met you all in person, and I do like that personal interaction. But as far as getting the information out there and making a fun event for youth that is informative and that teaches them those pre-employment skills, those post-secondary skills that they need to know, we're able to do that. We're able to deliver that. So I'm not at all concerned about how we're going to do going forward. This was a little bit of a hiccup, and to me, this is something that I've been saying all along. I think in the end, we're going to be glad that it happened, because we were able to think outside the box in how we were providing services. So I think that's really good. And so I don't mean that I'm glad that we had a pandemic, don't get me wrong, but I just mean that I'm glad that we're able to kind of, anytime you're able to weather a storm, I think you're better off in the end. So with that said, we are going to continue these works, and we are very proud of how this program has grown over the past 6 years. These numbers kind of floored me. We held a lot of workshops, and we had a lot of attendees at our workshops and our youth events. On average, our annual youth that we were able to provide direct engagement with, on average, was 1,000 students a year, which for our state, that's a pretty good number. And I'd like to see that number go up. And I've got lots of ideas on how that's going to happen. So, and just the final statement: the meetings and the events at the RTNs, they're part of the RTNs, but more than anything, RTNs are about the relationships that are made. Now, I can tell you just from experience going to these events, and I see the pre-employment specialists who work with the youth in the school district, and they see them at these events, and they're interacting with them and relating to them as the young adults that they are, and they're hearing everything that we're saying. We're maybe saying the same thing that their teacher told them yesterday, their life skills teacher or somebody like that, or their parent has been telling them, but because we're doing it in a different format and we're saying it again, they're hearing it, they're owning that information. And it sounds like we're repeating them, but we're not. I mean, we have to get out there and get the message out to them about their rights as a student, their rights as a person with a disability, as an employee, and going into post-secondary education. So I'm really proud of the work that we're doing, and I'm glad to be continuing.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I think you guys do it in a different way from all the other RSA PTIs. So we always love to share that. Thank you so much. And now we're going to be jumping over to opening doors for multicultural families. Rihanna, are you with us? Rihanna? Brianna? I know she was having some difficulties, so if anyone else from Opening Doors is able to speak. No, we are not able to hear you. So I guess I'll start. We have been working with Opening Doors for Multicultural Families since the beginning of the RSA funding, and they are based in Washington State and do amazing work with culturally and linguistically diverse populations. Let me see if I can figure out why we're not seeing her on the phone.
She said she just tried the phone too, but that wasn't working either.
Sometimes you have to merge them. Let me merge you. Okay, can you try Rihanna? Try to talk now. I might have unmuted your line. Rihanna? You are. heard you. We're not hearing you.
Is she on the phone, Josie?
You said she's on both.
There's a phone that's muted. Yeah, I'm gonna click on mute and see if that's her. 253 number?
Yes.
Whoa, oh, okay. So,
okay.
other people need to mute, but we hear you now.
Oh my God. Sorry, guys. This is what I was afraid of.
Yeah, I think you need to get away from your computer.
Or mute your computer. Okay, Rihanna. Nope.
Okay, hold on. I have to move away from here. Okay, can you hear me?
I still hear
Still
an echo.
echoing, huh?
Yeah.
Might want to close the computer, exit that area.
It's true. I can mute you. Let me see if I can mute your other line.
Hold on, let me go to another room. Been having internet issues this morning.
Okay, you sound better, Rihanna.
Can I come in the room? I have to be.
Okay, I will read the screen if you want me to.
Hi, this is Michael from Open Doors. I work with Rihanna.
Yeah.
Rihanna, just let me know if you need any support, just let me know.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah.
Okay, we can hear you.
Is it okay now? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you need me to read it for you? Or do you know your slides?
I have got some stuff here. So,
okay.
Yeah. All right. I'm so sorry about everything. I know we are. Yeah, but actually have made to work. So with Open Doors for Multicultural Families, we have been having a very great partnership with this funding with RSA, and we received this funding for the past 5 years. And then it was extended to the 6th year, which we currently will be winding it up in September. And with this funding, we were able to do various activities. Number one is the transition resource guides that we developed in 9 different languages for culturally and linguistically diverse youth and their families. So the guides come in 4 different parts. It talks about life after college. It talks about independent living, about other services that youth can actually connect to, there are also videos regarding transition services online as well on our website that can be accessible, and these are in 7 languages as well. We also provided cultural competency trainings to over 1,100 professionals on how to engage culturally and linguistically diverse youth and families in transition planning and services. We provided trainings and direct support to over 17,500 CLD youths and families in transition. We participated in transition network meetings, in conferences, transition fairs from across Washington State, and we also collaborated with other parent training centers in other states through network meetings and information sharing. We conducted youth programs for the past 5 years, and these included DVR pre-employment trainings, youth leadership trainings as well. So with all these activities, our aim was to provide CLD youth ages 14 to 26 years of age with disabilities with the information that they need to smoothly and effectively complete their high school and venture towards adulthood. I think that's what I have.
All we have here is how to download the guides.
Yes, I have that. Okay. I was looking at the timing as well. Yeah, so I have got a slide over there. The guides that I had mentioned, the transition guides, they're available on our website. And I have a step-to-step guide of how to download those guides from our website. It's free, free access, and it's really relevant for so many families and youth when they're planning for transition. Okay.
Whoop. Thank you so very much. Everyone, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I know that we ran long today, and so you guys win the award for hanging in there. And I'm going to share our final slide because I would love for you to please fill out our evaluation. So if you do not fill it out this very moment, you will be receiving an email within the next day and then a follow-up email that will have the information to fill out the survey. But as you can see there, I'm not sure if that's a hyperlink for you or not, but we can put it in the text of the chat box, but we would love for you to fill that out. So I think, Miriam, if possible, if you can put that in the chat, that would be wonderful. If you need a translated version, please let us know and we will make sure to get that to you. Thank you again to all of you who have been part of this and the RSAs and those of you who have been here through all of this. So I really appreciate all the work that you've done. And Miriam, do you have anything closing, wrapping this up?
Yeah, I put the survey on the chat box.
Great.
Thank you so much to Wendy, our captioner, and to Patricia, the interpreter.
Yes.
Really worked really hard.
Yes.
So happy here.
Okay, well, everyone have a good and healthy week. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. If you go to raisecenter.org, there's a contact button and you will get a hold of us. So thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Wow. Wow.
Jess, you still on?
Yeah.
I'm sending you my, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Some of the information I have.
Okay.
But you know, I think I almost complicated versus complimented what you already wrote. So just take a look, whatever you want to cut, edit, add. I did kind of feel out of the loop. You're right, without seeing the narrative or where.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's really hard to be able to like write pieces separately. I wish we could all be together and just do it. But no, we can't do that.
You, I mean, because yours looked pretty darn done to me already.
We are still here. We have to close this meeting.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it was old stuff, and I sent you some new information, but I will.
So
you said you emailed it to me?
Yeah, I should have emailed now, but if not, I'll go back and check. But if you, yeah, feel free to do whatever you want with that mess. So, and then call me, and what gaps or what pieces are missing, let me know, and I'm happy to do that. Okay.
Perfect. I appreciate it, Pig. Thank you. Tomorrow morning, Miriam, Pig, Deborah, we're still meeting at 10. I'm hoping to go through all of that tomorrow. So, Miriam, you are currently the host.
Yes, I'm trying to copy the chat box.
There's a way to do that, and I don't know how.
I don't know how. I am trying to just copy and paste, but it's not doing it. The whole thing.
I just got the whole transcription, so that's awesome.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, it like popped up.
Wonderful.
Can't you see where you can write into the chat box that file there, the little file thing? Will that make a file of the chat box?
No, that uploads.
That's what I'm uploading.
Oh, it goes up the other way.
I'm trying. Yeah, right. I'm trying to do it too, Miriam. I don't know. I thought you put on your little settings though to save it.
I didn't see it on the settings. Maybe it was there, but I don't recall.
I'm trying.
I'm not sure it was. I know that some like go to webinar. I think you can do that, or Adobe Connect. I don't want to disconnect before saving it.
No, I don't have it either.
Yeah, I'm just trying to like scrolling down and grabbing everything and on the clipboard, but it will not take it. Let's see.
Probably because I'm a participant. I can't do
I'll make you a host.
it. Okay, you can do that. I don't know if they'll make me any better.
Okay, change the host.
Let me see if I can do anything with that.
I am not familiar with analytics for Go Zoom. Not at all. It's all new to me. But I guess you get some analytics.
Play, enter. Let's pop out.
I click Control A to kind of highlight everything and Control C.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be working. I did that too.
Yeah. Let me Google it quickly before we go.
Some of you that are stuck in here that I don't know if they actually want to be sitting here listening to us.
Yeah.
You guys are more than welcome to listen in, but we're not that exciting.
Okay, at the bottom of the chat window, click